We resume the debate on P59, deferral of land transaction, Philip Lefevre House. Does anyone else wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple of things to mention on this one. Firstly, I would highlight yet again that the quality of the Standing Order 168 ministerial decision in front of us should have sufficient information. And I note that the SO 168 we have here does not include any diagrams or maps or pictures as has been requested previously and has appeared in a couple. And it does help members, and especially on this site, given we know the site was listed as a larger single unit and now it's a subset of what was being listed, that the map doesn't clearly show what's being sold in that. I will support this, sir, notwithstanding the Minister's ask for us not to. And I do want to raise a few facts about the site and the marketing history that it's gone through. As the Minister has said, the site was marketed twice, first with Kerray Estates, and it included its neighbour, the listed part to the east of the site. And at the time, the listing said the following. It said there was two sections of sites. The land to the east, the listed, was available for open market housing. But the caveat was that both Philip Lefevre House and Huguenot House were going to be required that the onward development would provide 100% affordable housing. And to read the exact part from the brochure that marketed this, Philip Lefevre House arranged over basement, ground and 3 upper floors. It goes on to say believed or concrete frame. Currently adapted as office accommodation, any onward development of Philip Lefevre House must provide 100% affordable housing. So when the Minister tells us that the price per square meterage has gone from, I think it was circa £600 to £900, he may not be factoring in whether the terms of sale have changed from offers when marketed by Kerray to that marketed by Godens. And the listing with Godens is interesting because it has changed as well. No longer is the Westin parcel, that of Huguenot and Philip Lefevre House, 100% affordable, but it does have conditions on it. So those applying to purchase a site may have done so in the consideration of the conditions advertised online. That was freehold interest offered as a single lot, subject to affordable housing development conditions. And I'll talk about the difference between conditions and the policy framework it's judged under. So members may be thinking that we are releasing this site as some sort of public good. We will get affordable housing, and members should know we will not. This, of course, is a stark contrast to what the budget anticipated this site to be for in 2025 and 2026. In 2025, the budget considered this public land, and I think it's under public land for public good. The site, Huguenot House, Philip Lefevre House, and 38 Lamott Street, was to be developed with the tenure, maximised number of affordable homes, with consideration of some open market homes. The public value to be delivered would be that of affordable homes, yet some open market homes will be considered to ensure a suitable return to Social Security Fund, which made the original investment in this property. Now, of course, 38 Lamott Street was no longer mentioned in the Budget 2026 section, Public Land for Public Good. Huguenot House and Philip Lefevre House were. This is a document approved by this Assembly only in December last year. And it said the tenure of development on this site should be for housing to support the community as either affordable homes or a form of sheltered or supported living should the site be ultimately released for housing. And the public value to be delivered in the right-hand part of the table says the site is being evaluated by relevant ministers to ensure that optimal public value is created through the reuse of this site. But, sir, today we have a sale of a site with no restrictions on its sale. And I should be clear that I did follow up with the Minister's officers with the following questions, following oral questions last Tuesday. One element raised was that the Minister didn't like the other offer because it proposed, I think, 40,000 square foot of residential development, he said today. He wanted a better development. So I asked, the Minister has stated that the decision was to have a carefully considered density, and this influenced the choice of sale. I asked, can you confirm whether or not, or I actually asked, can you confirm there is no condition on the site that delivers or caps density. Response: that is correct. There is no condition on the site that delivers or caps density. So the Minister's decision to sell it for a purpose is not conditioned. But the big one is that this site is being sold as open market land. There are no conditions for affordable housing provision within the contract of sale. I asked, can you confirm that the Bridging Island Plan provides no protection to this site under any housing (H) policy? The response: I would confirm that there is no requirement for the site to be developed for housing under the Bridging Island Plan if acquired by a private developer. The officer expands and says, should a private developer apply for housing, then the requirement for affordable housing is activated through policy H6, in brackets, up to, a minimum of 15%, applicable to residential development of 50 units or more. Or, following advice from the housing unit, if the site is acquired and developed by an arm's length organisation, then the affordable housing requirement is 100%. Both options are, of course, subject to viability. So really, this is to highlight, sir, that the sale of what is a significant parcel of land, a significant proportion of 1 acre of built environment in town is being sold for 2.3 million. Less money than we spend to rent our own building, the new Union Street offices from the Social Security Fund per year. We rent buildings, we were renting Liberté House from its owner for over £530,000 on the same road per year. Open figures provided when the freehold of that site was offered for 3.25 million. Despite that, and us being a tenant, we didn't buy that site. We rent Bermuda House, which we can see is going under renovation at the moment, for hundreds of thousands of pounds. Yet we are selling with no restrictions on land banking risk, on the provision or the type of development on this site for 2.3 million, what is a valuable asset. Some would say that it will rot if we hold on to it. I say there is no protection to stop it rotting with the new owner at the moment. So those are the points I would make. I've mentioned before I live nearby the site and I maintain that declaration on the road, but I am quite far away. But I do think that with sites like this, we shouldn't be so quick to move, and members must be equipped with the information. This is an open market sale, a disposal of land, no security, it will be developed. Every opportunity, it will be land banked. And so if members are voting to see regeneration in this part of St Helier by a private developer, they have failed yet to secure the means to deliver that.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I'm really pleased to follow previous speaker, and I'm grateful for Deputy Curtis to raise in this particular point, because it wasn't part of my speech, but where it's connected to me. And I'm looking across the Assembly. The members who were here during the Bridging Plan debate, 2022, you might remember we had a very massive debate when we decided to take field out of the affordable housing at field H1219 next to the Hot Valley. So we took the field out of the affordable housing for development, and immediately was other amendment brought in, and we decided to approve field for the development for people with severe disability. Where we finding ourselves in another 2-3 weeks, we'll have a planning committee meeting, and where we finding ourselves that now that field having 59 units proposed, some of them for people with disabilities, some of them for 55 plus, and if they don't sell, there will be an open market in a year, and it's no restrictions. So it sounds from, I don't know, I had a deja vu moment where we didn't put here in the Assembly very clear message that this field will be to affordable housing. We decided, no, we want to protect the field. We are not putting it in any other shape or form. So this proposition in front of us today, it's not about just property transaction. It's, for me, it's about the public assets that we hold. And we all know once land is gone, it's gone. It's gone for good. We cannot get it back. And I want to bring to members very simple reality. If you open a Google map, and I've done it recently, and we looked in that part, what we call Central and South St Helier, that area, if there are anywhere a small brown site where we can put a pocket park, none, nothing. It's nowhere, unless some building coming out, basically it's nowhere where you can put, maybe you can put planters, maybe you can keep the trees, but it's nowhere in that part of St. Helier is option to create a small square with 2-3 benches and nice greenery and for some social place. And this is the reality. Another thing that I want to bring to members' consideration, and maybe it's seen on my social media over the last 4 weeks that I began my drop-in session across all St. Helier, all districts, and I also launched a survey, public survey, to ask what people in St. Helier would like, what their top 3 priorities, what will make St. Helier helpful. I would continue this engagement over the 6 weeks, but this morning I looked into the graphs that created the responses that I received. I didn't ask them specifically about the site because site wasn't there when I created the survey, but I asked a general question. Now, the top priority that nearly half of the 51% of the respondents picked up one of their 3 top priority, more green spaces and allotments. No housing, no cleanness, green spaces and allotments. Allotments we cannot do there, but the green space we might. It was followed up closely by neighborhood improvements, more leisure spaces, and nearly 20% of them specifically called for pocket parks, which is smaller parks. It's not abstract wishes, they are real life priorities of the people we represent, at least I represent. And it doesn't stop there. When I asked about people what will make St. Helier more welcome, the message was consistent. More market and local activities, more cafe street sitting, more community events and culture life. Again, not housing. And it's about creating a town that people enjoy, not just one we built into. And for me, Deputy War proposition is not saying do nothing. It's simply asking to stop and properly consider. If it's affordable housing, it should be affordable housing, and it needs to be clear caveat into this. Green spaces, play spaces, community use. And yes, housing, the people did take the housing, but it's about right housing. Proper cost-benefit analysis before the sale. My parishioners have already told us what they want. So, and that's to be honest. We debated today first-time buyers, Deputy Curtis' proposition again. We have already high number of 1- and 2-bedroom units, and yet every proposal from the market from 2026 was a lot around this particular flats. Now, improve housing, it was actually in the survey, and asked about the survey, it was 23.5% up till now with the responded. It's not just about filling the sites with more flats, it's about improving the quality of life. And let's make it really clear that we know that the mental health facility stayed on the place. It is important there. They're creating a new, very, very good, interesting, good place with place for respite, with place to sit down, which will be good for the community. And it means the government does recognize that the hub community have a value beyond housing, and this is why part of the site was developed for the community. And again, our Constable of St. Helier are not here. As the deputies, we were not asked or involved or presented any plans about this. When I've been asked to come to see the diner, I did come to see the diner and I saw the plans and I really like them. So I ask, it's not, and for me, parish put a bid. I'm not sure how did it work with the parish. But for me, it's not just financial, it's social, environmentally, and healthy. And once we sell it, we lose that choice forever. So in summary, this proposition doesn't block development and simply asks to post and make the right decision. In town, so much less, so little space left. We cannot ignore what residents wishes to have green and social. It's about the balance between financial return and community value, between today and the future. It's not delay, it's to decide properly what will be built, including maybe housing. So the people of St. Helier told me what they would like, and I will listen, and I will be supporting this proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. So I'm speaking to oppose the proposition, but not just to oppose the proposition, but to call out a pattern, an increasingly troubling pattern of political distraction, misplaced priorities, and failure to deliver on the commitments that improve the lives of people of Jersey and those who live and work in St Helier. P59 is the wrong proposition at the wrong moment, proposed by a deputy who consistently wants to stop projects and replace with ideas alone. Ideas which, when we scratch below the surface, have little or no actual detail or deliverables. While the Assembly entertains yet another new initiative, one more shiny object to point at in a press release, the realities on the ground tell a very different story. Our essential public infrastructure is unfinished, delayed, or quietly kicked into the long grass. And nothing, sir, illustrates this failure more starkly than the stagnation of the Gas Place school development, and ironically, the 2 park spaces that accompany this project, a project that the deputy opposed, then supported, and now opposes again, and we'll see what happens in the next manifesto. So when summing up, when the deputy sums up, can he now explain if he is in favour of the school and the parks or not? If not, why is he proposing another park? The deputy seems to want another park whilst opposing 2 that already exist. And so this is at best contradiction, and at worst, or it's something else, so let's finish the term nicely. Gas Place is not a luxury. It's not optional. It's not something we can get to later once we've had our fun passing new propositions. It's a core educational facility that Jersey children desperately need, and its delay is nothing short of unacceptable. We have children learning in outdated, overcrowded, inadequate buildings while we sit here debating entirely new initiatives that will drain time, money and attention away from the projects that are already strategically necessary and publicly supported. How can we look...
Do you accept an intervention from Director Wall? Want a clarification?
I'd like to finish my speech first, if possible.
Yes, of course.
How can we look parents in the eye and tell them we've focused on their children's futures when we repeatedly prioritise new possible projects instead, perhaps in the name of an election campaign? And this site has been considered and is simply inadequate for any school facilities, which was mentioned in the Deputy's opening speech, and it will not save the space of problems of space or access alone. The Deputy have opposed the project of the new park space that was arise from the completion of Gas Place, opposed those spaces consistently. So I was at a public event set up with 4 speakers against and myself. Even then, there was no coherent idea of why delay did anything positive for St Helier. And why, sir? And so there were opportunities at Nelson Street earlier on for the youth facility was also opposed by the Deputy that were lost, when we could have had new facilities, I believe, for the honorary police as well. There was a real opportunity missed there, which would have cost a lot less, and we would have had we could have found brand new facilities for the honorary police, but that's in the past. But thankfully, we have a youth facility now being built, even though the Deputy did vote in a government plan to remove money from that and give it to somewhere else. And let's be clear, this proposition simply stops a sale and says, let's start work that's already undertaken again. So the comments paper details the work that's been undertaken, and I'll add, when I walk around the area, I don't think I can see a worse place for a car park in that built-up area with the access that it has. I really don't think it's a good place for it. I'm not a town planner there, but I understand I'm not a town planner. And the further irony of this sale adding to the Social Security Fund, while the Deputy and others were up in arms over removing money from that fund, that mustn't be lost. So every new proposition carries a cost in funding, staffing, and our political bandwidth. And at a time when we should be laser focused on completing existing commitments, schools, infrastructure, essential public service, this proposition pulls us in the opposite direction. It adds more bureaucracy, more complexity, more policy sprawl, and more unfunded aspirations to a system already struggling to keep up. And we are finally obtaining the land for the school. The battle to absolutely obtain that, which has taken so long, will be happening in the coming month or so. And then we can get on with that project, sir. But, sir, this is another new idea for something we can do with a building if we don't sell it. And this Assembly must stop piling these new ideas onto a foundation we haven't even finished building. So good governance means we finish what we start, and this proposition fails that test. St Helier needs joined-up planning, sir, and leadership over projects, not constant delay, continuous new ideas with no real outcomes piled up until we have a critical mass of inaction. I will note, sir, that I did not vote for Field H19 to be used as it were for exactly the reasons that we have it now. So we cannot carry on and say to the public, we'll make announcements without any form of delivery. They're tired of proposals without progress, tired of new projects being added while old projects gather dust. So I'm going to say again, because it might be my final opportunity, Gas Place should be under construction. Instead, we are undertaking political vanity projects like P59 that make manifesto headlines but make no difference because there is nothing deliverable behind cancelling this project. So it's time to send a message, which is let's finish what we need to in St Helier. Youth facilities, Gas Place, parks at Springfield, parks at Le Bras, and then let's look to see what other spaces, and let's look what we've got when we've got those completed. Let's look at what our society is doing in the centre of St Helier when we've actually got something completed, because we haven't yet. We need to deliver the essentials, stop being distracted. Finally, sir, we need to finish the youth facility in St Helier, because that's going to make a significant difference to that area of the young people that are there, somewhere to go, somewhere to interact, somewhere to intervene early on. Those projects were not supported quick enough. And so we are getting there again with this proposition. Let's end another project, pile some ideas up that are simply not deliverable. So I urge members to reject P59 and let's get on with the projects that we desperately need to do for St Helier. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Ward. Will you accept a point of clarification from Deputy Ward?
I'll save it for my speech. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. No, he doesn't want to anymore. Deputy Renouf.
Yes, sir. This debate does seem to be going down some byways, and I wasn't minded to support it, but I do think Deputy Alex Curtis has raised some important questions, which I would hope somebody in government might help to answer for us. This building was originally going to be for affordable housing, and I would like to know, is it true that that there are going to be no conditions at all placed on its use afterwards? And if that is the case, there might be a good reason for that, but we certainly haven't had it explained to us. And given that we are supposedly in a housing crisis, and given that that housing crisis is largely an affordability crisis, I would have hoped that the government could explain why that site, which was apparently originally earmarked for affordable housing, 100%, but then whittled away a bit, but now apparently has no assignment for affordable housing at all, why that is the case and what the thinking process was behind that. Because without that, we are, I think, taking a bit of a we're sort of slightly making a blind decision here about this, and I do think it would be very helpful if the Minister's report had dealt with that issue head on, but in the absence of that, and my apologies if I've missed something somewhere that did explain this, I think it would be very helpful to have it clearly explained by government why that original ambition and that string of arguments that Deputy Alex Curtis raised, why we haven't had clear answers to those, and could we have them, please?
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Schoen.
Thank you, and I also wasn't going to speak, but I think actually I would like to urge members to think on what Deputy Curtis, Alex Curtis, mentioned, I suppose maybe even more than the proposer, in the arguments that he put forward, because it is concerning to hear, for example, from Deputy Rob Ward about it's very important that other facilities are put forward, but it is strange to have the government changing from putting this forward, this site forward for affordable housing. We are in a cost of living crisis. It's the number one point that islanders talk about access to affordable housing, and this is government land that could be for affordable housing. It doesn't need to be one-bedroom flats. We all know that we are saying that we're overrun by one-bedroom flats. This space could be seen used in another way, but with the as Deputy Alex Curtis said, the changes, stark changes from when expecting whoever takes over to develop affordable housing there in whatever form they feel they can to now one where it is open market. And so now any houses, luxury houses could be developed there. We have to remember that luxury houses could be developed there. You know, that's what we're giving away here, is government land where we could control policies and control the way that we can support islanders with affordable housing. We're now giving away a piece of our land our land, I mean the Jersey people's land, to developers to develop whatever they want there. So I think it's really important for members to think that it's not, and we've heard a lot of rhetoric because of the three prospective candidates for Conatab out there. I think we just need to put that to side and really think very carefully, is this what we want to do with the resources that we have at the moment within government to help to provide affordable housing for islanders in whatever form that can take. And just I wanted to put on record that when this first came up in the scrutiny panel a few years ago, as the Minister mentioned, I thought it was really important to protect the trees that are along La Motte Street and protect the trees that were sitting on the public land. There's two very important trees, the turkey oak and the flowering ash. They are very beautiful going down that street. There's very little trees in that whole area of St Helier, and they are beautiful specimens. And so I requested that the Environment Minister would protect these trees. He did so. Unfortunately, the protected tree register in the public domain doesn't show this, and I hope that we can fix that. But I really also would like to ensure, and I wanted to put it on record, for the Infrastructure Minister to ensure that any negotiations, and whatever the outcome of this particular proposition, that going forward that these two trees that the Environment Minister did protect, as I requested, that they continue to be protected in whatever state and whatever development that comes on this important piece of land in the centre of St Helier. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else want to speak on this? Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. I think it's important at this point to remind the Assembly that the site currently belongs to the Social Security Fund and not the government. I gave the Minister clear instruction. The Minister for Infrastructure knows how exasperated, I think, would be the term that I could rightly use about the amount of time that it has taken to sell this site. It has been delayed once because we had to separate it out from the health site following the initial tendering process. To say I was disappointed about that would be an understatement. It's been delayed again whilst the government undertook feasibility studies into possible use of a park, possible use of a car park. That delay, I have lost count actually about the number of emails and letters I've had to send to the Minister for Infrastructure in my role as Social Security Minister, in looking after the fund and wanting to get the money back into the fund that we need back in it. And of course, any member of this Assembly, it's not been a secret that this site was up for sale. Any member of this Assembly could have brought a proposition at the budget to give the government the amount of money that it would need to purchase the site from the Social Security Fund and give the government the money it would need to build a park, car park, or anything else. But of course, no member of this Assembly did that. Because I have seen the reports that have been undertaken, and let's not forget that what Deputy War is asking us to do is repeat a process that has just been done. Repeat a process that has delayed the sale of this site already by a further year, and every delay is costing money. We're paying in the region of £60,000 a year, I think, in rates. We're paying additional money on the site in terms of security on the site. The building, my understanding is the building is not fit for purpose for modern office blocks and could not be retained as such. In fact, I think the most recent inhabitants of the building are rodents who had taken accommodation in the building prior to my department leaving well over a year ago. So it is most certainly not a fit for purpose site for a temporary school, and I would not want to be placing our school children in an unfit for purpose building. So my understanding is the cost of a possible park, if the government were to buy the site from the Social Security Fund, it would not just be the cost of the site, but we're talking in the region of about over £10 million to develop the site into such a park. So if any member of this Assembly can hand on heart think to themselves, yes, that's feasible, yes, we've got the budget, and yes, we can afford to turn this currently underused site into that and vote for this, then I really do wish them luck in achieving all of the things that we've already got in the pipeline with regard to capital investments and capital programmes. What the Deputy is suggesting is just not feasible. It's not an efficient or effective use of government time and money, and it most certainly won't get the money into the Social Security Fund that the fund is due from the sale of this site. And I really do hope, sir, that we can put this matter to bed, that we can get the sale completed for this site, and that at long last we can sell a site that's currently not being used, and hopefully it will be developed into a much better facility for the people of the island. So, sir, I urge people to reject this proposition. It's going to cause further unnecessary delay, and it's just asking for a repeat of work that's already been undertaken. It's a complete waste of time and money, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Will you take a point of clarification from Deputy Renouf?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Deputy Renouf.
Yes, I'm grateful. Would the Minister explain with the letters that she wrote to the Minister for Infrastructure, did she mention the question of affordable housing and whether it should be used for affordable housing or not?
So my role as Social Security Minister with responsibility for the Social Security Fund was to ensure that this site was sold on behalf of the fund, and that was the instruction that I gave to the Infrastructure Minister, that I wanted to see the completion of the sale as soon as possible. Matters for what the site is then used for are planning matters and not matters for the Minister for Social Security.
Thank you, Minister. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? No one else wishes to speak. I call upon Deputy War to reply. Deputy War.
Thank you, sir, and I thank all members who've taken part in this debate. I'd just, first of all, like to respond to the Infrastructure Minister. The Minister, it's always interesting when our interactions, he often talks about playing the ball and not the man. I'm sure one day he might live up to his values, but clearly not just yet. The reason this proposition is so late is because the report was lodged so late. And I'm grateful to the bailiff for allowing the short lodging of this proposition and for allowing this debate to take place. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I'm unaware of being invited to any presentation on this site. We've had ports present to us. I'm talking about the deputies. We've had Infrastructure Department detailing developments on King Street, Broad Street, developments of Halkett Street, but there's been absolutely nothing on Philip Lefevre House. There has been no engagement, in fact, at all with the St Helier residents. When the Minister talks about St Helier input into the Regeneration Steering Group, I assume he's referencing the single vote of the Connétable in whose parish this property sits. It's just interesting that despite it being in his parish, he has so little sway in the outcome of this issue. St Heliot residents, the biggest demand is for more parking. We know that. We hear that every once a month at least. Deputy Curtis, thank you. Land banking, absolutely. Left to right, absolutely. If you're voting against this proposition, there is no guarantee that this site will be developed for all the reasons put forward by Deputy Curtis. And I'm grateful for him for bringing that. H1219, deja vu moment, Deputy Gardner, absolutely. Actually, it's interesting, isn't it? Deputy Ward said he voted against H1219, but actually, I'd just like to remind him, because I'm being constantly reminded by Deputy Mezek, that they actually voted for the Bridging Island Plan. So in my book, that means he actually voted for the field. So I'm sorry, that's fact. Rob Ward, also, we're talking about...
Deputy Rob Ward.
Deputy Rob Ward, sorry, Deputy Ward, sorry, sir. Deputy Ward also goes on about Gas Place. I'm sure, I love the way he brings up the great big red herring in all of this. Deputy Jeune and Deputy Reniff, abandonment of affordable housing. Is this really what we want to do? Thank you, both of you, for bringing those forward. Deputy Felton, ducking the issue of the type of homes. A deputy of St Helier who's thinking of what about affordability? Where's the affordability in all of this? People want affordable homes, more affordable homes, and yet suddenly we seem to be abandoning the policy. How would any member of the Assembly know what the value of the site was, by the way? That's how do we, in the island, when the budget debate is brought forward, how do we know? We've only established a value for this site when it's been brought to market. How do we second guess what the government should budget for that if money was allocated to that site? So the Minister struggles to recognise that we are talking about one of the most densely populated parts of Jersey. Every public asset must be evaluated for its ability to increase or protect open space, civic identity, and community well-being. The one thing which hasn't been mentioned in here is the St Helier Open Space Audit from 2018, which gives us the evidence. Our values give us the direction, and our decisions will give future generations the verdict. We can choose to treat public land as something to be monetised, or we can choose to treat it as something to be stewarded. We can choose to erase meaning, or we can choose to preserve and elevate it. We can choose to leave St Helier more crowded, with more concrete and more fragmented, or we can choose to leave it greener, fairer, and more humane. Members, I believe the choice is clear. Let us act not as managers of assets, but as guardians of legacy. Let us make decisions that honour the past, meets the needs of the present, and protect the well-being of the future. And with that, I call for the appel.
Sir, can I ask a point of clarification?
Would you accept a point of clarification for the
Yes,
Minister?
sir.
Sir, in terms of the briefing that was offered to the Deputy and the Scrutiny Panel, I believe the email was sent on the 18th of March, sir. Thank you.
If that was the case, sir, I apologise if I've overlooked it.
Thank you. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce the proposition has been rejected. 9 votes for, 33 votes contra, 2 abstentions.
We have the contra.
Yes. What do you want, the 9 and the 2?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Those members voting for the College Harbour, St Helier, St Lawrence and St Clement, and Deputies Gardner, War, Alex Curtis, Barbara Ward, Wilson and Andrews and those members abstaining, Deputies Renouf and Jeune.
I think the request was for the conch by the proposer.
Oh, the conch as well? Yes.
Those members voting contre, the Connaught Harbour, St Bellard, Trinity, St Peter, St Martin, St John, Grouville, St Juan, St Mary and St Saviour, and Deputies Southern, Tadier, Luce, Doublé, Morel, Lehegra, Ayer, Bob Ward, Alls, Gorst, Farnham, Mesick, Balash, Coles, Porre, Miles, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Rose Binet, Miller, Howe, Ferry, Kovac and Stevenson.
The next item is continuation of rural and marine support.
Sir, I think members, if I may, members may have just seen I have just lodged an amendment to my amendment to this proposition, and I would like to ask, with a view to reaching a consensus, and I would like to ask members for short notice.
Right, so
please.
your proposition is that the
short
lodging,
notice for it to be discussed today.
the
Thank you,
proposition
sir.
that the lodging period should be reduced, is it?
Sorry.
Members-
Reduced lodging period, yes, sir, apologies.
And relevant standing order. Have members seen this amendment? Well, Minister, if you're going to propose this, you probably need to make a speech in support of it, explaining the amendment, so that members can understand why it is so late and what it is you're proposing.
So you'll be aware I was out of Ireland at the end of last week. I'm not able to take this forward at the time, but we've been considering further, and I am trying to make the amendment basically more acceptable to all states members. It basically identifies that we will accept a proposition, but it makes it clear that the future council ministers and States Assembly have to agree a funding source. And we are removing the reference to availability of funds for the agricultural loan scheme, so that takes away that possible question mark about funding for the agricultural loan scheme. So it is trying to reach a more, to minimise the debate, because it is trying to support the proposition with a relatively smaller amendment to reach more of a consensus.
Point of information for the...
Well, yes, point of clarification from Deputy Renouf?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
It might help assist members make a decision on the shortened lodging period to know if this amended amendment has been is supported by the proposer of the original proposition. Is she able to shed any light on that?
Sir, I'm afraid no, I haven't had a chance to speak to Deputy Morel, but I was aware that he did not support the previous amendment, so this is an attempt to move forward at speed.
Is the proposition seconded? Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Morel, do you want to speak on the proposition?
When the bailiff looks at you in the way he just looked at me, you know you meant to speak.
You haven't got to.
I'm more than happy to have this amendment to the amendment, brought forward and debated. I haven't had full opportunity yet, because it really has just been lodged, to consider whether I could accept it or not. I am a bit concerned about some of the wording around the 1.1 million for the Better Business Support Package, still having a lot of uncertainty around it. So not having had proper time to digest it, I wasn't planning to accept the amendment as amended. But I accept Deputy Miller's trying to find a way forward. I just haven't had time to properly work through it. So in my head, I'm more than happy to move to debate with Deputy Miller's amendment as amended, and I'm happy for that to be a shortened lodging period. My view was, though, that we'd probably still have to debate the amendment and the proposition separately, because I just haven't had time to kind of really probably think it through. Thanks.
Deputy Renouf, do you want to speak now?
Yes, it was just to say that, in case people were confused by that point of information, I'm grateful to the Minister for clarifying his position, and in my view, since I think the intent of what the Minister is proposing is the same, I think I'm happy to accept a shortened lodging period.
Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition to reduce the lodging period at this late stage? In that case, I invite the Minister to reply. Minister.
Sir, I would just like to, I'm grateful for Deputy Morell being understanding, and I am grateful to everybody who has worked at pace to try to get this amendment ready today. I have to confess I thought this was going to be the last item of business so that members might have a little bit of time. That's clearly my misunderstanding. But I would like to ask members to support the late lodging. It's a relatively minor change with a view to taking this forward today and allowing us to conclude today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Is the appel called for?
Yes.
Appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting on this proposition to reduce the lodging period in relation to this amendment, to the amendment lodged by the Minister to the proposition of Deputy Morell. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce the proposition has been adopted. 43 votes for, 1 abstention. I now invite the greffier to read. Well, Deputy, you're not minded to accept the amendment, are you?
No, sir.
No. I invite the greffier to read the amendment.
The states
The proposition.
decide whether they are of opinion to refer to their Act dated the 7th of November 2023, in which they approved the proposition entitled Increase in Revenue Expenditure for Agriculture and Fisheries, P74/2023, as amended, and to agree that the Council of Ministers should ensure the current level of financial support for rural and marine sectors in 2026, including both the Agricultural Loan Scheme and Better Business Support funding allocated directly to rural and marine, continues in perpetuity and increases in line with RPI-X each year until this proposition is rescinded by the States Assembly.
Deputy Morell.
Sir, before Deputy Morell starts, may I just check on a declaration of interest with you
Yes.
that I think has been mentioned? My business either qualifies already or will qualify by the end of 2026 for the receipt of the Rural Support Scheme, and therefore, certainly by obviously the end of the budgetary period and the next time will be in receipt or qualifying for or eligible for the Rural Support Scheme, and therefore it's an interest I need to declare, and I presume it would be a direct pecuniary one, and the question would be as to the number of businesses and organisations it's shared with. The Minister may have an idea as to the number on the Rural Support Scheme that would help direct you in a ruling.
So the effect of this proposition will be to ensure that that scheme, amongst others, continues to receive funding, increasing with RPI going forward.
And the reading I would have of that would be this is a scheme this proposition aims to secure a level of funding that may not exist, and that level of funding would almost directly correspond to how much a business in receipt of said funding would receive, my business being one of those.
Yes, so you do stand to directly personally benefit? Yes. I don't know if anyone can assist on the number of likely applicants
if I may,
from time
sir, yes,
to time.
there are approximately 100, just over 100 businesses on the Rural Support Scheme, sir.
Yes. I know the guidance I issued some months ago speaks about 100 being, if you like, the magic number for the purpose of identifying what is a small number of other people. But in the circumstances, I think the best course would for you not to vote in this debate.
I thank you for your ruling, sir.
Yes. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. It's tea time for Deputy Curtis, I think.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Sir, as I stand to rise at what may be, for any of us or all of us in here, one of the last propositions that we debate in the Assembly, I want to first of all start by thanking members for their support of the Agricultural Loans Law, which we debated last week. But it's with that in mind, the idea that actually we have started something and now we need to finish it before this Assembly is over, that is where my proposition comes from. Sir, this Assembly can be proud of having played the key role in saving the agricultural industry in Jersey. When we were elected in 2022, the agricultural sector and the marine sector were in a parlous state in terms of the, quite simply, the revenues coming in and the costs involved in agriculture itself. This proposition aims to finish the job that this Assembly started back in 2022 and 2023 by creating the Rural Support Scheme, funding the Rural Support Scheme, and quite simply saving the agricultural industry in Jersey. But how does my proposition finish that job, sir? Well, sir, the purpose of the proposition is to provide certainty to the industry. That certainty will enable long-term planning. It will enable succession. It will enable capital investment decisions to be made. It will enable continued competition with neighbouring countries, all of which benefit from huge subsidy schemes from their various governments. And it will ensure that only a States Assembly decision will result in the reduction or the removal of the Rural Support Scheme in the future. So that is a very important point. One of the driving forces behind this proposition is that in my mind, we must not let a future government hide the reduction of the Rural Support Scheme or the removal of the Rural Support Scheme away in the footnotes to a budget, sir. But what I am saying is that in future, if a future government wishes to reduce the support for the agricultural and marine sectors, that government will have to come to the Assembly to get that permission, and it will be with the permission of the Assembly that that could happen. And so this proposition empowers the States Assembly in a way that it has not been empowered previously. Sir, farmers and fishermen cannot continue to operate in such a state of uncertainty. Without them, we lose what ability Jersey does have to feed itself entirely. Without the knowledge of ongoing support beyond the 3 years from now, which is currently covered in the budget 2026 to 2029, agricultural and marine businesses will not be able to plan to make investments or succession plans that will ensure they're able to succeed into the future. That is an incredibly difficult task, given the world of ever-increasing costs that we currently live in. It is vital, sir, therefore, that support rises with inflation, and that the minimum wage support of 1.1 million is baked into that, because wages will only rise. So to remove it would immediately put the industry at risk. And in terms of the proposition and the amendments, that 1.1 million minimum wage support is what is referred to as the Better Business Support Scheme. It is not grants per se, it is 1.1 million that is directly there to cope with the significant rise in the minimum wage from the last 2 years. But as well as the minimum wage rising, sir, with regard to rising costs, let's have a look at the issues of the day. The war in Iran is having an immediate impact. So the Jersey Farmers Union has informed us that farm diesel has risen from 50.65 pence per litre in January of this year to 100.2 pence per litre today. That's an almost 100% rise in the cost of farm diesel within 2 months. Fertiliser prices are equally rising sharply. Urea, a key component of fertilisers, has increased approximately 80% since the beginning of this year. I started by stating that this Assembly can be incredibly proud of its success in supporting and saving the agricultural sector. But the job has not yet been completed. This proposition finishes that task. It stops us snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. It is the only way to provide farmers with the certainty that they need in a deeply uncertain world. The proposition gives us the best chance we could have of saving the fishing and aquaculture sectors as well. Those sectors face enormous challenges that require government help if we are to maintain a marine economy. By providing support, which is given in a public money for public goods basis, we are helping the island to feed itself, reducing reliance of food imports. Local food, as we know, has enormous health and environmental benefits. We are maintaining the island's fabulous landscape, which brings benefits for tourism and all islanders' well-being. Even the very value of islanders' homes are affected by the agriculture sector. And if it was not there, I think you'd see many of those homes diminish in value. We are stimulating returns to Treasury with this proposition because via income tax, GVA and GST values, agricultural support enables a clear profit to the public purse. And I think that's really, really important. The agriculture sector provides a net profit to the government's coffers itself. So the support is a profitable investment by this Assembly. We are also helping to continue the ambassadorial role of our agriculture sector. The value of the Jersey cow and the Jersey Royal cannot be underestimated, particularly at a time when both the dairy and potato farmers are taking these high quality products into new markets. We have milk products going to the Far East. We have Jersey Royals going to European markets. These are things that we should be enormously proud of. But, sir, as well as the outcomes from the support provided by the Rural Support Scheme, we should actually be proud of the scheme itself. It is being recognised as an exemplar in both the UK and Europe of how farming can be supported to provide environmental, health and well-being benefits, as well as other public goods. So I have a quote here from Patrick Holden, CBE, of the Sustainable Food Trust, who visited Jersey last year for the Regen Gathering Festival. He says, "I was amazed and inspired by what is happening here. There is a story here that is touching people. The combination of rewarding small-scale regenerative farming that delivers climate, environmental and social benefits. In all regions of the UK, they have made a mess of agricultural policy, whereas here, it is radically different. It is interesting that somehow small islands can lead, because of their very smallness. Jersey could lead the world in this. You could be world-beating." And so, sir, it is that rural support scheme that really is world-leading and world-beating that I am asking the Assembly to lock tight, in the sense of providing the Assembly with the power to determine whether it continues or not in the future. And in case some members were wondering what the Rural Support Scheme does, let me just outline some of its outcomes over the past year or so. The number of registered businesses on the Rural Support Scheme, sir, grew from 36 in 2021 to over 100 in 2025. That is because we have enabled smallholders, such as Deputy Alex Curtis, to benefit from that. And one of the reasons for enabling smallholders is that helps with succession, because it has brought new farmers into the industry, because young people can now for the first time see a way of actually making a living in farming. And it also provides the opportunity for succession, because, for innovation, because the innovations that they do on their small holdings can, when successful, be passed on to the commercial farmers. So as well, the amount of farmland managed by the LEAF scheme, which is linking environment and farming, has increased from 23,750 verges in 2019 to 26,357 verges in 2024. That's an 11% rise. The amount of farmland managed with organic certification increased from 878 verges in 2019 to 1,571 verges in 2024. That's a 78% increase in the amount of land being farmed organically. The amount of land used to grow food crops for local consumption increased from 588 verges in 2022 to 945 in 24. That's a 63% increase in the amount of land being used in Jersey for local food consumption. And the number of workers in the scheme, in those businesses benefiting from the scheme, increased from 746 in 23 to 831 in 24, showing the need to maintain that minimum wage support. The 2025 Rural Support Scheme, sir, also supported 169 open farm educational events, over 7 kilometres of footpaths on private land, 133 wildlife ponds, around 2,000 kilometres of managed hedgerows, 356 verges of crops grown purely for conservational purposes, over 10,000 verges of cover crops grown to improve soil health, and over 700 integrated farm management plans promoting animal health, nutrient management, water quality, soil health, conservation and landscape, energy and carbon efficiencies, woodland management, and health and safety. So that shows, in my mind, that the Rural Support Scheme is delivering plenty of public benefits for the public money that has been provided to it. And it will continue to operate on that same public money for public goods and public benefits basis. So, sir, I think there is no question in my mind that it would be an outstanding way for this Assembly to end its term of office by supporting the Rural Support Scheme being prolonged into the future and ensuring that it is only this Assembly which can reduce that investment, because that investment is going to help shape the island through uncertain times and will make us a stronger island for it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the proposition seconded? Thank you. Minister for Treasury and Resources, you have proposed an amendment. Do you wish to take your amendment as amended?
As amended, yes, please, sir.
Members content for the amendment to be read as amended? Thank you very much. The greffier will read the amendment as amended.
H2, substitute the words including both the agricultural loan scheme and better business support funding with subject to the Council of Ministers identifying and States Assembly agreeing a recurring funding source for the better business support funding. After the words rescinded by the States Assembly, insert the words and that the agricultural loan scheme should continue with the determination of further capitalisation based on the demand for loans.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'm grateful to members for agreeing for this amended amendment to be taken at short notice and to everyone who helped produce it in time. This further amendment aims to find some way to proceed to achieve the objective that I'm sure we all support, which is to provide strong backing for Jersey's rural and marine sectors. There is no disagreement about the importance of these sectors. Agriculture and fisheries are central to our economy, our culture, our environment, and our food security. They are also under pressure from rising costs, workforce challenges, and the transition to a living wage. The government has already acted to provide financial support, with the budget for agriculture and fisheries having increased from £3.7 million in 2023 to £7.3 million in 2026. So the budget has almost doubled in a space of 3 years. Through the budget 26 to 29, we have committed to inflation-linked uplifts to support schemes, with the budget expected to reach £8 million by 2029. That's £8 million per year, sorry. We've also set aside £10 million to recapitalise the Agricultural Loans Fund, and a considerable volume of loans have already been made from that fund in the last year. We provided temporary living wage support in 2025 and 26 and introduced practical measures such as relief from higher vehicle emissions duty for agricultural machinery. These are real, tangible interventions. The question today is not whether we support these sectors, but how we do so in a fiscally responsible manner. The proposition, as it stands, seeks to guarantee an additional £1.1 million of funding indefinitely, increasing each year in line with RPIX unless rescinded. While well-intentioned, this does create budget issues, and we all know how difficult it is to rescind a proposition such as this. First, this turns temporary support into permanent spending. And I would like to emphasise, contrary to some of the material, the emails we've seen, that this is not cutting expenditure. The Better Business Support funding package was provided to assist with the transition to a living wage and was always clearly intended to be time limited to 2025 and 2026, helping all businesses to adjust and not to create ongoing dependency. Making this support permanent changes its purpose entirely and prefers one sector over the economy over others. Second, the proposition does not identify how this permanent commitment would be funded. Currently, the transitional support is financed through a temporary reduction to the state's grant to the Social Security Fund. Sir, it's not the first time I have said this, I'm sure, but Treasury advice is for long-term funding commitments and decisions to be made through the established budget process. This allows ministers and the Assembly to balance competing strategic priorities across public services, to evaluate fiscal pressures, to allocate resources in a transparent and accountable manner, and ensure medium and long-term financial sustainability of public finances. The proposition proposes additional spending outside of the budget process without identifying how this will be funded. If approved by the States if approved by the States Assembly, this will place an obligation on the next Council of Ministers to propose how this will be funded and for the Assembly to agree in the next budget, and that is what my amendment really clarifies. Funding options could include a permanent reduction into the state's grant to the Social Security Fund, which is the current source of funding, or an increase in departmental savings targets, which presently stand at £29 million for 2027. Alternatively, other departments may see cuts to their budgets. The Agricultural Loans Fund has now been capitalised with £10 million. It will be for the next Council of Ministers to agree to the funding of and further transfers to the fund. This will need to be weighed against competing priorities, such as a depleted consolidated fund, depleted stabilisation fund, and a strategic reserve, which is below the recommended target level. So we all want to support these vital sectors, but we must do so in a way that is financially prudent, delivers value for money, and is sustainable for islanders. This amendment clarifies that we are leaving those decisions for the next Council of Ministers and the next Assembly. And so while I support, and we all support, funding for agriculture and fishing, there is so much more we could do than just give them funding. There is more we could be doing as an Assembly than give them money. And I think this is quite the juxtaposition of this with the future generations, if you don't mind me putting it shorthand, is quite interesting. There are lots of ways we could do. We could stop creating new red tape and bureaucracy, like requiring them to accept cash. Because now, when they deliver their potatoes to a local hospitality business, that business will say, I want to pay you £300 in used tenors, and they will have to accept. That's extra bureaucracy and cost. We could consider the needs of employers when we next increase the living wage. The living wage has increased by some, I think, from roughly £10.50 in 2022, will be going up to £13.69, I believe, on Wednesday. That's some £3 since 2022. And we all want people who work in this island to be remunerated well. But we do have to think about the knock-on issues for our businesses in the island. We could perhaps make it easier for them to recruit staff from overseas. We could take the friction out of employment. We could facilitate the export of produce and its sale in local shops. We could all just buy more local produce. So it's not just about subsidy. It's about creating solutions overall. For me, it's about creating solutions in which farming can thrive. And perhaps a future minister could perhaps sit down with the sectors and consider a similar piece of work that we have just done under Deputy Gore's leadership for financial services, because many sectors of our economy need that clear view on what our problems are and how we fix them. So, sir, I propose the amendment as amended. Thanks.
Thank you. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Would the Minister give way for point of clarification?
Will you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Deputy.
Does the Minister think that my proposition P48, which said that people should have a right to expect to pay for goods and services for in-person purchases in goods and services, would apply to the delivery of...
I'm not sure that's the point of clarification, is it?
I think it is, sir, because I think the Minister was talking about reducing red tape in other ways, which meant that now farmers would have to receive used £10 notes for payments. But is that the case, sir?
You want to respond to that?
Sir, I think my understanding of the Deputy's proposition is that if you are receiving in-person goods and services in Jersey, you are entitled to pay for cash. What that means will be that there will be hospitality businesses, perhaps other food producers, who will be having to accept cash from their customers. That means they have a large bag of cash at the end of the night, and they could take it to the bank and suffer the cost, or when their supplier turns up in person with the delivery of local fruit and veg and potatoes, they could say, I want to pay for cash. I think that is an obvious reading. I don't believe it said in person, meaning just individuals. I think it means every business is required to accept cash. And yes, that will accept, I believe, that will extend to the scallop fisherman who's selling his scallops at Bonwee or Bully Bay, sorry, I can't remember where I last bought them. It will include to all those small businesses who are selling their goods and services in the island. They will have to take cash, and I don't think I think that will work on a business-to-business basis as well. So we must be aware of the consequences of our decisions. That's my point, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Morell, you wish to speak?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And I thank the Minister for her amendments and her speech. There's just a few things I wanted to pick up on there, sir. I think, first of all, the Minister, and I understand why she says this, but she says my proposition creates budget issues. Well, so it just brought to mind that the minimum wage increase, which is about 30% higher than inflation, sir, that the government imposed, has created budget issues for all farmers and fishermen in the island, sir. And so their budget issues were created directly, or in that area, as far as minimum wage is concerned, were created directly by government, sir. That the Minister also referred to ongoing dependency. And I've got to say, yes, there is going to be an ongoing dependency, and this is really the point of my proposition, sir. There is no way around the need to provide support to the agriculture and the fishery sectors. There is no alternative to that, sir. Let me just tell you, for instance, and it's interesting how it has waxed and waned and over the years. So historically, direct support to agriculture and fisheries in Jersey was as high as 5% of total government expenditure. In 2025, that had fallen to about 0.4%. But 0.4% is a win, because in 2018, we provided less than £1 million of support to the rural and marine sector. Well, it was just the rural sector then. Less than £1 million, and the industry was absolutely on its knees. It really could not see a way forward, and it is only because we have turned that tide, and as I said, it is only because this Assembly has turned that tide, that we can now say that at 0.4% of government expenditure, we're about in the right place. And the industry can see a future. And why will the industry always need that support? It's because the industry is directly competing with French farmers, who get massive support through the Common Agricultural Policy in the EU, with UK farmers who get massive support. They have £2.5 billion of support per year for the next 2 years. From the UK government. They're competing with Dutch farmers, Belgian farmers, Italian, Spanish farmers, all of whom gain massive financial support. And yet, come 2018, we had condemned our industry that does not have any scale on the size of its farms. I think we all know that, because we look at farms in Jersey and we look at their size versus a farm in Cambridgeshire, for instance. And you can see there's a massive size difference. So our farmers have zero ability to get scale benefits from their farms. And we were providing them with, effectively, no financial support. The industry was next to the end. It really was that simple. And so there is an ongoing dependency. There will be an ongoing dependency, and it's because of that need for that ongoing dependency that I brought forward my proposition. Because there is no chance that that dependency is going to be needed. I agree with the Minister when she says we should be buying more local produce. There are other ways to help, absolutely. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is where the help is needed most, because farming and fishing are such enormously capital-intensive industries. The fact that we now have 60 new farmers in the industry who can become the commercial farmers of the future has turned the tide, and means that the industry has a future. I think it's really important as well. I was slightly concerned, and this is more of a personal issue, sir. The Minister also mentioned that we need strategies, as the Financial Services Minister has done for his industry, in other sectors. And it seemed to me that the Treasury Minister was ignoring the work of my department for the last 4 years in creating rural and marine strategies, creating a visitor economy strategy, and creating an arts, culture and heritage strategy, all of which are their own versions of the Financial Competitiveness Survey. It's possible that the Minister shouldn't listen to the Chief Executive as much, because he suggested that there were no other strategies. And that was really wrong. It's my understanding that he suggested that there were no other strategies, and that is wrong, because we have strategies. In fact, the financial services sector was the later to that party for the competitiveness style strategies, but I congratulate the Financial Services Minister on creating it. So the reason, as I said, that I hadn't accepted the amended amendment was because I hadn't really had time to think it through. My concern with the amended amendment is that where it says, and so it's up to the wisdom of the Assembly on this, sir, is it says subject, so as far as the financial support for rural and marine sectors in 2026, subject to the Council of Ministers identifying and States Assembly agreeing a recurring funding source for the Better Business Support funding. So that's the 1.1 million for the minimum wage support. In my mind, that looks to me as though something where the Council of Ministers could just say, oh, we can't find it, sorry, it's not happening. And that was the reason why I felt that I couldn't really accept it. On the other hand, the second part that was amended, that the agricultural loan scheme should continue with the determination of further capitalisation based on the demand for loans, and removing and the availability of funds. I'm much happier with that part of it. There's no question, that bit. So really my concern is around that bit about the subject of the Council of Ministers identifying State Assembly agreeing recurring funding source. So in my mind, it's not quite where I would want it to be, but and because farmers and fishermen, they have to pay the £13.50, and it will rise again in April this year, and it will get closer, it will get higher and higher. They have to pay that minimum wage, and they do need that extra support. It really is simple. But so I do leave it to the wisdom of the Assembly as to whether they wish to accept the Minister's amendment. It is, I have to say, in a better position than the original amendment that the Minister put, but I still think it really is up to the Assembly to determine which way it prefer to go. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadea.
Thank you, sir. I rise to support the underlying proposition here, and on consideration to speak against the amendment, sir. So I think I think Deputy Morell's proposal here, and I accept that also he said that he's been working with other colleagues in the Assembly, other ministerial colleagues as it happens, but I think he's got more wide support than just that. Recognises something fundamental here, is that when you invest in the economy and when you invest in both individuals and businesses who are doing some great work, as in this case as custodians of our countryside and also of our coastal areas, we are not just doing something for the immediate future and an immediate economic gain, but we're actually investing in the future, which has been a theme already that we're talking about today. But it does more than that. It gives confidence to those industries that government hasn't just got its back and is willing to play its part now and subject to the waves and the turbulence of whatever economic winds that might be blowing, but actually that government support is here for the long term. That irrespective of who is getting elected in a few weeks' time, in a few months' time, and in fact which governments might come and go in between or after those periods, that this scheme has been set in place, and it will only be changed if there's been a democratic vote of this Assembly. Now, of course, I do have some experience of this. It's not exactly the same, but there are some very strong parallels here with what I've sought to do, and which subsequent assemblies and majorities of members have supported in the past through arts and culture and heritage funding. And what I've seen from experience in that sector, because it isn't just immediately those arm's length bodies that benefit, is actually the wider creative industries, is that it does give confidence and a boost very much to that sector. It has meant in that sector that people can go out and that they can invest with confidence, but they can invest their time and energy, not just their money, knowing that actually what they're doing has strong support, both from within government, from within the Assembly, and from the wider community. And it leads to innovation. And I think that's what it will do in the agricultural and fishing sectors, sir. It will send that message, A, carry on doing what you're doing, being great custodians. Of course, innovating, because you have to. In business, you can never stand still. And by doing that, I think we're sending a strong message that we will be here to support the industries. Remember, these are industries which elsewhere do benefit from massive subsidies. I think governments recognise that. They do need to put in, and as been said, there is an economic multiplier, both in the wider economy, but also in real terms for return to government. And I don't think, I do have to say, I'll be pleased to catch up with the Treasury Minister on a more personal level, because I know she's been doing some very important governmental work and assembly work in Paris. I was invited to that too, but I thought it was more important for me to, because I had two important propositions last Friday, to present those. But I am glad that the Minister was able to attend that and represent the Assembly last week. She missed two great debates, though, I think. In fact, two kind of interlinked debates. I think they were both about the economy. One was about making sure that agricultural land is used for agriculture, not for electricity. And we might have been on different sides of that debate. And there was also the cash debate, which I know the Minister's alluded to, and I think she might have been sorry to miss either or both of those debates. But of course, the latter was supported by a strong majority, only 8 against. And I find the comments quite strange, actually, about somebody turning up with 300 used tenors to pay for some goods and services in a farming context, as if that might be viewed in a bad way. I would suspect that a farmer or a scallop diver, when you're buying the goods off them, or you're paying for, or they're paying for deliveries, which may also be the case, I don't think anyone's going to quibble about whether you pay for your £300 worth of goods and services in old £10 notes, so long as they're still legal tender and they can be cashed in at the bank, or indeed passed on to pay your bills, or whether you send that through a BACS, because I'm sure actually that a lot of invoices will routinely be paid from bank account to bank account without any charges, in fact, and that's probably a great way to actually pay. You know, are we going to see in future coffee shops taking payment via BACS? Because that's one way to make sure you avoid potentially any kind of charges, whether it's for cash or for cards. It is a brave new world, and maybe indeed, like the advert we sometimes see on television, I'm not sure quite which one it is. Maybe it's, sorry mate, crypto only. That might be a way that the farming industry in Jersey will be going with their honesty boxes in the hedgerows, sir. But it's an exciting new world, and I think so long as they're being paid one way or the other, I think it makes little difference, sir. So look, I'm quite happy, and I would urge, actually, Deputy Morell, we don't always find ourselves on the same side of every debate, but I do know that his heart is for the people of Jersey. It's also for the economy of Jersey, and he wants to see thriving, vibrant economy throughout the island. I would urge him to robustly oppose this amendment and actually stick to his guns, because I think what he's got in front of him provides certainty into the future. And of course, if things change, if there's a sudden uptick in the economy and farmers and fishers find that they don't need any government support, or they need less government support, or in fact that living wage is no longer a problem because it's either become established or we're all working for nothing because we're doing it out of the kindness of our heart, then maybe they won't need that support. But until such a time, I think that is part of the contract. As somebody who strongly supports the living wage, and I think it's the right thing to do, because I think everybody who lives in Jersey deserves to be paid a fair amount for a fair amount of work. The second part of that social contract is for us to make sure that there are supports for the traditionally low-paid economic sectors so that they can afford to pay the wages. And if that takes place in the form of a loan or a grant, then I think I'm quite comfortable that that is both a good and honest use of taxpayers' money, which will find its way back into the wider economy. So it is literate and sensible economics and politics, and I'm happy to support that. So I won't be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Renner.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to refer to this as Deputy Morell's proposition rather than the Minister's proposition, because I think one of the more amusing things we've seen over the course of this week's debate is the disintegration of a government. And what we now have is various sort of blue-on-blue kind of propositions and amendments and so on. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean to say either the proposition or the amendment are without merit. And so Deputy Morell's proposition, I think the intent of which not a single person in this Assembly would argue with. Of course, we want to see that greater support for the marine and rural sectors of the economy, and it was indeed a very good piece of work brought forward originally by Deputy Luce and supported subsequently, I think, by pretty well everyone going forward. And so I don't think this is an argument about that. We are all in support of that, and I think we'd all like the support to continue. There's also no doubt about that. But there is another principle at stake, and it's actually quite a slightly smaller principle than I thought it was, because Deputy Miller's amendment actually concedes more ground to Deputy Morell's original proposition, as I read it. The amended amendment is even more, if you like, gives even more ground to the original proposition. To the original proposition. But nevertheless, there is an important principle there, and I think it's worth just reminding ourselves what the amended proposition would say if the amendment passes, because I would really like to know what people would find objectionable about this proposition were the amendment to pass. What is it that is so hard to support about this, other than perhaps, well, we'll see, but let me just read it. To agree, I'll miss out the preamble, which is not controversial. To agree that the Council of Ministers should ensure the current level of financial support for rural and marine sectors in 2026, subject to the Council of Ministers identifying and States Assembly agreeing a recurring funding source for the Better Business Support funding allocated directly to rural and marine, continues in perpetuity and increases in line with the RPA each year until this proposition is rescinded by the States Assembly. That's what, the loans bit I haven't read because I think we're all in agreement with that. That's not controversial either. So that's what the amended proposition would say. Now, I find that exceptionally hard to vote against. That seems to me to capture all the main intent of what Deputy Morell is asking for, but with one small qualifier in there, which is that, you know what, there should be a funding source for it. And that is surely where this assembly should be, surely. And there is, of course, a history to this, because when that funding was originally brought in, it was intended to be transitory, 2 years, a 2-year funding package to deal with the introduction of the living wage, and it was advertised as that. It was transitory, and therefore, of course, the funding source was also transitory, in the sense that we all know that the government's last budget had £100 million of funding that depends upon a £50 million grant from, for example, from the Social Security grant, and in most 99% of readings of the situation, that is very unlikely to be a long-term sustainable source of funding. So it is perfectly reasonable for a proposition about rural and marine funding to say, look, we really have got to square off where the money's going to come from. We all want the same thing. We all want that to happen. But really, we should not, as an assembly, be just saying we will commit to this in perpetuity without that. So that proposition just puts that amendment just puts that little qualifier in there, whilst accepting that so long as that can be done, it does continue in perpetuity. The Deputy Morell said that the purpose was to provide certainty, I think, or it may be in the report. Certainly there have been speeches that mention the need to provide certainty. That is a laudable aim, but it does preserve a bit of an illusion, because I have to say that this assembly cannot deliver certainty. We do not have the ability to deliver certainty because we do not know what is coming around the corner. We do not know what kind of extreme events might come around the corner and so on. So I do think we have to be a little bit careful about this notion of certainty. And all that the amendment does is put that little qualifier in to say, you know what, there might be circumstances in which this is not possible. And I always think when these propositions come before us, and you know, the interesting thing is always what's not in front of us in a way, because of course it's possible to make a brilliant case for this support for the rural and marine economy. And I would want to make it myself as well. As I say, I don't think that's what's at stake, but the implicit decisions we take if we say we will fund this no matter what, if we say we will support this no matter what, is certain other things won't get that support, because they haven't been the benefit of a proposition that comes to this assembly that says that when, that in the future there will be in perpetuity support. And some of those things are quite interesting, aren't they? The Deputy Morel is also in charge of the digital economy. He hasn't chosen to ring fence and protect in perpetuity funding for digital. The States Assembly also voted for a Reform Jersey inspired policy around childcare support. Again, we're not ring fencing that in perpetuity, although we might. It's a perfectly good cause. It's certainly one that I would probably want to get behind, is supporting childcare. Certainly voted for it. But that's not getting the gold standard forever in perpetuity. Sitting beside me, we have the proposer of a proposition around fertility. That's also, as far as I know, not in perpetuity. It doesn't have that sort of gold standard in perpetuity around it. And I'm sure other members could think of lots of other things that we could all make a case for, were we to bring the proposition.
Deputy, we are in court because the...
Second time in this sitting.
Yes, I don't know what it is.
I'm taking it personally.
Well, you really shouldn't. Right, okay, I think we're all right again now. Thank you very much. Please continue.
Phew. So yes, I think there are plenty of worthwhile causes that could attract this and would be equally deserving were we to sit down and consider them in isolation. I would say to Deputy Morel, just be a little careful what you wish for, because I do think that this proposition does raise a very interesting question about taxation. We are going to end up, I am sure, post-election, this island will end up having a debate about the balance between taxation and spending. And there will be calls in that debate for taxation to be looked at, as well as the spending element. And it is noticeable that at the moment, of course, these sectors are not taxed on their profits. Deputy Morel highlighted that they do indeed contribute profits. It becomes very, very hard once you become a long-term recipient of government funding, I think, to say that you should not pay some tax. Certainly the case strengthens for that. I mean, I certainly thought that when we handed out about £150 million in COVID support during the pandemic, it certainly emphasised that businesses are dependent on the state as a backstop. And yet many of them don't pay tax. So I do think that in becoming permanent recipients of government funding, that question will be raised. And maybe it should, But it's certainly a point worth noting, because we've moved explicitly from a position where we were saying that we were providing support to cover a transition to the living wage to, as Deputy Morel now says very clearly, permanent. This will be for good, and in perpetuity is indeed the whole point. The next government will face exceptionally difficult decisions around spending. It has £100 million, in round figures, overhang of spending that is not covered long term. What we're picking out is one thing for support beyond that. And we are saying, even with the amendment, we're saying it is first amongst equals. It is protected. It is protected under the amendment. The only qualifier is if there is not an ability to find the money. And that seems to me to be an important signal that we send to this island about prudence in finance, in government spending, that we don't just sign away money without knowing the full picture. So, as I say, I return to the amendment to the proposition and the actual wording of it, and I find it eminently supportable that we should ensure the current level of financial support, subject to the Council of Ministers and the States Assembly agreeing a funding source, and that it should carry on with the RPI every year until, unless it's rescinded by the proposition, as the original proposition by the Assembly, as was originally said by the original proposition. So I shall be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. I had been going to be undecided whether I was going to start in my comments referring to Deputy Morell or Deputy Taddier, but I've just added Deputy Renouf to that list, so and now he's leaving the room, but there we are. I wasn't sure whether I was going to talk about how BACS payments work and the possibility of instant payments on the blockchain. As the Deputy knows, BACS payments aren't instant, depending on the banking institution, so that deals with his comment. Deputy Renouf is, of course, reminded us again in that about the payments that were made during COVID-19, but slightly incorrectly, because the payments were made to businesses for wage support. They were not made so that businesses could keep trading, because businesses were told by the government to stop trading, and therefore, if they were stopping trading, they wouldn't have any income to pay salaries. So the funding was to provide salary payments so that islanders weren't going into work, not the other way around. So it's not that businesses were dependent upon the state, it was that the state decided that the right thing to do was to provide salary support to islanders through businesses, of course, because that was the easiest payment mechanism, in order that they could survive the restrictions placed upon them by the state. And so I return to Deputy Morell, and Deputy Morell, let's be fair, had to make some really quite difficult decisions during this parliamentary term. And even though he's been making those difficult decisions, difficult long-term decisions, back to the question about future generations, he has been quietly getting on with the parts of the economy that he is responsible for, and bringing out strategies, supporting them, arguing for extra money in the budget. And I think he should be congratulated for that, and not chastised in the way that some have done. And he, like I and others, have been extremely cautious about the increases to the living wage, for the very reason that it would have a detrimental impact upon certain sectors of the economy. It's no surprise that we stand here today with the before us, because he, together with other ministerial colleagues, persuaded the Council of Ministers that the only way we could support any introduction or increase in the minimum wage or living wage was by putting money aside to support businesses with their productivity, with their marketing, and with their growth strategies. And so he has done. And so we get to the point of, yes, he's argued the case for additional money per se for farming and fishing, and those were the amounts that the Treasury Minister outlined. He, together with his colleague here to my left, argued the case for refinancing the Agricultural Loans Fund, and so that has been done as well. Those gentlemen in the gallery will know that we've still got quite a lot of work to do around the bureaucracy of that thing in order to get money out of the door to impact farmers' real lives. But we have been left, let's be honest, with this 1.1 million problem, because nobody is proposing that the living wage doesn't apply to farming and fishing. But there is a conversation to be had, in my mind, that if the living wage is only working because taxpayers, and I'm going to come back to that, are directly subsidising it for certain sectors of the economy, it's not working. It is not working, and we will need to rethink about that and how we do it going forward. So I'm in no doubt whatsoever that the farming and agricultural community need this additional money. What worries me is that there are plans, and I think it's in April, that the living wage is going to go up further. So we're going to have a decision today. We're going to have a decision today which is going to be positive, and I'll come back to process, of the 1.1 million. But the living wage is still proposed to go higher, and I worry that that effect of that will be to diminish the good work that the minister has been doing. So we do need to work through. Some of that. The other point I want to make is that out of that 20 million, 10 million a year in 25 and 26, a good couple of million, I think, was going to Visit Jersey and to route development. That will fall away at the end of 2026 as well. To my mind, that is also short-termism. And the reason I say that is because if we look at the amount of money that we allocate right across the economic portfolios of government, and we think that we're spending 1.2 billion, and yet in the stimulation of the growth of that money coming in, we're spending, and I've looked to my colleague here because I know how much it's spent in my bit, let's say we're spending less than 30 million. We're spending less than 30 million to stimulate the economy, to grow the income line so that we can provide all of those social services to our community that we know we need. By any calculation, sir, it's not enough if we are seriously wanting to create an economically growing situation, if we were wanting Ireland to see more money in their pockets to help with the cost of living, if we want to have flexibility to bring forward cost of living measures, we are not spending enough. And that was also the case for farming and fishing. And why farming and fishing? Of course, because they help us with our resilience. But there are some difficult questions that we also, as islanders, need to face about how we are supporting that industry in their resilience with our buying habits. And others have talked about cheap food. It doesn't feel like food is cheap when one goes and does one's weekly shopping. But in historic levels, then that is absolutely the case. And so for my part, we come down to another debate about process. Because can any proposition in this assembly outside of the budget process bind the budget process? The reality is, of course, it can't. Because every Council of Ministers and every assembly has an annual debate about budget. We can bring propositions here till we're blue in the face. The reality is that the budget process is the process whereby money is allocated. And I say that because back to this 1.1 million, that 1.1 million for the last 2 years has been delivered by a reduction in supplementation. So we've said we're not going to put that money into the Social Security Fund. Rather, we're going to use it to spend on minimum or living wage supplementation to farming and fishing. I don't think either there's any member, if this proposition was that we reduce supplementation indefinitely, I don't think any member would agree to that. And therefore, it's about process. Will this proposition, amended or unamended, I've got to say, amended or unamended, will still mean that the future states in the back end of this year will need to make a decision about the allocation of this money and where it's funded from. And that's why I support the work that I know he's lodged this as a backbencher, but let's be clear, the work that the Minister has done supporting these sectors. I absolutely accept that it's a process issue and it will have to be decided during the budget process. But whatever happens today, sir, there will be a very, very clear marker from this assembly to the next assembly that farming and fishing needs this money, and that the next government will need to continue to support them. Thank you.
Sir, point of clarification.
Will you accept point of clarification, Deputy?
Of course I will, sir.
Yes.
Thank you,
Morel.
sir. And it's with regard to the statistics about government expenditure on the economy. Would the Minister clarify from his speech that does he understand it is correct that Jersey spent in 2024 a lower percentage of government expenditure on economic affairs than any OECD nation in 2023? Could he clarify whether he thinks that's correct?
So he is absolutely correct, and he makes my point more eloquently than I did. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? If no, yes, Deputy Kovac. Deputy Kovac?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Finishing my light. Sir, before coming to Jersey, I worked as a project manager and consultant on programs with European Union grants, many of them focused on agriculture and rural development. These projects had some of the highest uptake rates and successes because the need is real and the impact is tangible, no matter of jurisdiction. My master's degree is in agribusiness, which combines economics and business management with rural development. So I have both the academic understanding and the practical experience to know one thing clearly. Without consistent long-term funding, this sector simply cannot thrive, especially on an island environment. On a small island like Jersey, this matters even more. Supporting agriculture in combination with other sectors can strengthen our economy even further if we are imaginative and driven enough. At the Digital Jersey briefing the other week, we saw how digitalizing parts of agricultural activities increase productivity for businesses. We talk about enhancing tourism, about being proud of Jersey's heritage and traditions, and promoting them at every opportunity. Agritourism is a perfect example that could be considered, as investing in it benefits all this: agriculture, heritage promotion, and tourism, creating a wider positive impact for our economy. So when we talk about continuing to fund and support farmers and fisheries, we are not always just talking about food. We are talking about broader economic growth, innovation, and opportunity for all of Jersey. Our land is limited. Our production is not mass scale. Our food security is fragile, with around 90% of food imported. That alone should tell us how important it is to support and grow what we can produce locally. Continuity of funding is not a luxury, it is essential. I have also seen the importance of this sector through education. I created a partnership project between Hodlio School and the high school in Cluj-Napoca, my hometown in Romania, called From Field to Plate. And this will continue with further partnerships projects already in plan. Students visited Jersey and Romania, including my former university, learning firsthand where food comes from, with what efforts, how important it is, and why this industry matters. Because this is not just about farmers. It is about future generations understanding value, sustainability, and resilience, and instilling in them an awareness of the value this industry brings to our day-to-day lives. As this proposal highlights, the main proposal highlights, this is not only about agriculture, it is equally about our fisheries. We are an island. The sea is part of who we are. Our fishing industry is not just economic, it is cultural. It is what allows us to serve fresh local seafood, something we proudly showcase in our hospitality sector, as ourselves into our restaurant business. It is part of the Jersey experience. If we want to keep that, the quality, the freshness, the identity, we must support the people who make it possible. While I recognize the intention behind the latest amendment to the initial Treasury Minister's amendment to ensure a clear and recurring funding source, it does introduce a level of uncertainty that concerns me. The sector does not operate on short-term cycles. It relies on confidence planning and long-term investment. Making support conditional on future budget decisions risks undermining that stability. If we truly want our rural marine sectors to grow and thrive, we must give them the certainty they need, not just the possibility of support. The main opposition The main proposition is about certainty. It's about giving farmers and fishers the confidence to invest, to plan, to innovate. The amendment is not. Without that certainty, decline is inevitable. And we have already seen the numbers: fewer farms, fewer herds, fewer boats. Even if the funding source is decided later, we must commit now to long-term support for this vital sector to have continuity. If we do nothing, we are not standing still, we are going backwards. This is not about subsidy for the sake of it. This is about investing in food security, in sustainability, in our economy, and in our identity. Sir, my passion for this sector is clear. My support is clear. If we want this industry to exist, not just survive, but grow and reach its full potential, then this support must continue. Otherwise, we risk watching it slowly disappear. That's why it's important to reject the amendment and support the main proposition, and I ask members to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. And can I start by giving my 100% wholehearted support to the proposer of this. My name appears on the report, as members I'm sure will have seen, but I'm just grateful to be able to support him. We stand side by side in this matter. So hearing speeches like Deputy Tadier's, Deputy Kovacs is really, really welcome. So this is a proposition about farming and fishing. And I'd just say to members that we have an opportunity here to do, again, what we did 3 years ago now, which was to reinvigorate, revitalise the farming industry and the fishing industry as well, and I'll come on to that right at the end. The debate we had back in 2023 allowed existing farmers to see a future. It allowed youngsters who were contemplating whether they could come into the industry. It allowed them to see a vision, to see the horizon, to see that there was actually a future for them in these most traditional of Jersey industries. That original money that we put aside then helped to deliver public goods. It wasn't just a handout to farmers, because the Rural Support Scheme, the Rural Marine Scheme, doesn't just give money to people to rush off on holiday or buy a new car. It's given in return for public goods. And in the first instances, it's given for help with the cost of certification. For farmers, that might be the Red Tractor Scheme or the Leaf Scheme that the Minister, Deputy Morell, mentioned. It could be for help with the training. It could be for the development of any number of plans that we ask farmers to do these days. Chemical plans for where you're putting it and how often you're putting it on. Manure plans for how much you're putting in fields and making sure you're not putting too much to not do any good to the natural water courses and make it difficult for Jersey Water. To health and safety plans, all things which benefit the farmer but cost money. You know, all these schemes, all this training, all these certificates cost farmers and fishermen money. Fishermen have to keep up a number of things on their fishing boats every year, as you would expect, extinguishers and trackers and things like that, but they too have to do first aid so that they're in a position to help their crew, help each other out, and all those sort of things cost money. So the scheme helps with that. And then it goes on to help the biodiversity of the island. Paying for hedge work, more hedges, or field margins to be left alone for increasing biodiversity. Less cultivation, less chemicals, more nature. And then finally, there's money for investment, and we've heard about the benefits that productivity can have, and certainly, particularly in the dairy industry in the last 2 years, the amount of technology and innovation that's gone in there to help dairy farmers do a better job on a day-to-day basis, because as we all know, they work round the clock, and anything they can do to find time, to save time, allows them to go off and do another job, because there's never a shortage of jobs to do. It's not as if you find 5 minutes and you sit down, have a cup of coffee. Anyway, we did all those good things, members, and it was really fantastic, because the level of interest, the level of enthusiasm in the industry just bubbled out of it. And those of us that witnessed it, was really something to see. And then what did we do? We imposed 2 minimum wage increases in the 2 years following. That's fine, and we've done it, and we realise we've done it. But that basically just chopped £1.1 million off that money that we had just given to the industries to try to get them going again. And why is it particularly relevant to farming and fishing? It's because so many of such a high percentage of the employees on a farm are paid the minimum wage. So a big minimum wage increase has a huge effect on farmers. We knew that it would be a 2-year package, and as the Treasury Minister, as everybody said, we knew that. And the Temporary Minister herself said it was temporary. Treasury Minister said it was temporary, and we understood that. We put some money into the business support scheme, that those of us who supported the industry could see the cliff edge coming. It's been coming for 2 years, and it's about to appear. And while we're not taking money that's been put permanently, taking it away, what we are doing is, if we don't replace it, if we don't keep it consistent, is that the industries will see that money disappear, and it will make a huge amount of difference because it's vital money. We gave with one hand and we took quite a bit away with the other. I want to talk about productivity because, yes, that's money, that £1.1 million was aimed to try to get people to be more productive, to make sure that the minimum wage didn't have that much of an effect. But what I would say to members is, in the years previous to 23, times had been so hard. Every last corner had been cut. Every last little bit of productivity had been taken. The farmers and the fishermen had looked for every chance they could to find ways to do things more cheaply. And the ability to suddenly revitalise productivity wasn't quite there. Members will have seen the communications from the Farmers Union and from the Jersey Fishermen's Association, and today we've also had communications from Jersey Hospitality Association. And I think that's relevant, sir, particularly because the last part of my very scribbled speech here, I've put down the next states. And if I'm fortunate enough to be re-elected, I will certainly be campaigning the next States Assembly to move, to divert, to just slightly change direction with these monies, to concentrate more on local food production for local consumption. Because when you look around the globe, that's where we've got to focus. But I come back to members and say, local food production for local consumption is expensive. It involves manual labour, going out, and you can't go out there and dig 40 or 50 tonnes of potatoes. You've got to go out there and do a small amount. You've got to do a number of crates of cauliflowers, a number of crates of leeks or carrots. It's not mass production. You don't enjoy the economies of scale growing for local production for Jersey consumption. So that's where this money could be diverted ever so slightly. So I say to members, I see the maintenance of all these monies as vital for helping with food security in the years to come. It is important. This word certainty was mentioned by Deputy Renner, but we can't be certain. We need to be showing farmers that we are as certain as we possibly can be that this money continues, because there's nothing worse than uncertainty, nothing worse to destroy your enthusiasm for a job knowing that in 12 months' time your monies could be chopped off. I go back to the start, sir, where I mentioned farming and fishing, and I just want to spend a couple of seconds talking about fishing, because while we've helped the fishermen, while we're helping them with all those schemes they need to do and helping them with productivity and stuff, I would stress fishing in particular is really challenged at the moment. Our exports to Europe are challenged. The amount of money our fishermen can get for their catch is challenged. And then on top of that, the effects of global warming, of climate change, are having a devastating effect on crab, which has moved away from our waters, from lobster, which is also looking at signs of reducing in the catch numbers. It's particularly tough. They can have all the productivity measures they like, fishermen at the moment, but the actual stock in the sea is not where we would wish it to be, despite our best management efforts. So another good reason. I say to members, I can understand where this amendment's coming from. The Treasury Minister has a very difficult job to do, and committing monies up front to particular industries is always a challenge, but this is one worth supporting if we're going to keep our farming and fishing in good spirits. and in a place where it can help feed us into the next decade or so. I urge members to support the proposition from the Minister, but to vote against this particular amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, firstly, I apologise unreservedly to Deputy Morell if I overlooked his various strategies. I am sorry. I probably was aware of them and forgot, so I do apologise, and no disrespect was intended. Beyond that, I think I'm probably not going to go over everybody's contributions. I'm aware of the time, and I'm sure we all want to get on. Sir, I think it is very clear we all want to support farming and fishing. Of course, that's what we want. And my amendment, let's just look at the two parts of it. The latter part about the agricultural loan scheme, I think Deputy Morell is broadly happy with that. It makes sense. We're just saying the scheme will continue, but we won't, what that is saying is that we will not sit there with a pot of millions of pounds being unused, but it will be funded to do with demand. It will link to demand, and that funding will be found as required. As regards the first part, subject to the Council Minister identifying states simply agreeing, I will be blunt. It is a statement of the bleeding obvious. Sorry, sir.
I think bleeding is probably part on.
Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir.
Do you want to withdraw that?
I'll withdraw it.
There we are. Thank you.
But it is a statement of fact. There is no way around that. Whether or not you accept the amendment or not, if you accept the proposition, the next Council of Ministers will have to find a funding source, and the next Assembly will have to agree it. The amendment is simply a point of emphasis and clarification. I agree with virtually everything Deputy Gore said. We do know that, as I said earlier on, increases to the living wage do hit some sectors much worse than others, and we need to start being aware of that. We have the living wage, I think it's £13.69 on the 1st of April. 69? 59? Sorry, it's going up again on the 1st of April, and that will have an impact on farming, as it will have on hospitality and retail. So we do need to think about that going forward. So I don't believe this amendment creates any uncertainty, because the uncertainty is built into the proposition. We don't have a funding source, and that funding source will have to be found one way or the other. And clearly the next government would have to do that. And if I could just come back to the question of certainty again, I think I mentioned last week about everybody wants financial certainty, charities want multi-year funding. If you are going to vote for certainty for charities and for farming, then I hope that if we are here, you do all vote for multi-year budgeting for the government, because that is the only way we can vote. We can guarantee that level of certainty for charities and 3-yearly funding packages for farming and other sectors. So, sir, I make the amendment. I propose the amendment and call for the appel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting on the amendment. If all members have the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. I did close it, yes. Right. So can you help me, greffier? Did I close it before that last one came in or after? Counted it. Thank you. The amendment has been narrowly rejected. 18 votes for, 22 votes contra. So now move back to the proposition. Does anyone else want to speak on the proposition? Yes, Chief Minister.
I wanted to re-emphasise the point the Treasury Minister made in her previous speech, and I think Deputy Gorse referred to it, and I think Deputy Morrell and other members would agree that the future Assembly will decide in the budgeting process what happens. Of course, it is always difficult to take something out we have, and it's often challenging to maintain formula set grants. I mean, the arts grant, I think, has performed well for the arts, but as situations change, then it forces the Assembly to have a debate. And I generally support that position when there are mixed views amongst council and ministers. We fall back on the democracy, the democratic process of the Assembly. But I just wanted to say, although I supported the amendment, as Deputy Miller said in her speech, is largely academic, on the grounds that future assemblies can change course. And I will be supporting the proposition, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Minister. Does anyone else wish to speak on the proposition? Colin Thomas-Brillard.
So just briefly to emphasise the points both in agriculture and fisheries, the important matter is that those involved have the confidence to invest in the industry to take it forward. And without that confidence, they do fall away. And we've seen that to a large extent with the fishing industry. And I'd be supporting the proposition, and I'm pleased to do so to give that confidence. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Colin. Does anyone else wish to speak on the proposition? If no one else wishes to speak, I call upon Deputy Morrell to reply. Deputy Morrell.
Thank you, sir. And I thank everyone who spoke in the amendment debate, because that's where the main debate, I think, has happened. I won't hold anyone up other than to thank the Treasury Minister for engaging with this. I thank the Assembly for making that decision. I was kind of easy either way. But I just won't say any more except to say that if we pass this now, sir, it really will be the Assembly completing the work it started when we first sat in 2022. We will be providing a future and a certainty around that future for the farming and the marine economy sectors. And that's something we can be, no matter what happens to us personally in elections. This is something we can all be really, really proud of. And I'm delighted, if we pass this now, that we can all speak to every farmer and fisherman and know that we played a role in making sure that their future and Jersey's future with that agriculture and marine kind of background foundation remains in place. So I think we can all leave with our heads held high if we pass this now. Thank you, sir.
Is the appel called for? Appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. Before members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted unanimously, 43 votes for. I'll move on to work permit changes lodged by Deputy Poré. Main respondent is the Minister for Social Security. Deputy Poré, you've lodged an amendment. Do you wish your proposition to be proposed as amended?
Yes, sir.
Members content to take the proposition as amended? Thank you very much. I ask the greffier to read the proposition as amended.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs to A. Commission and publish an independent review of the current work permit policy, such review to include an assessment of the feasibility, implications and potential benefits and risks of changing the registration process for work permits so that they are held in the name of an employee and not the employer, whilst maintaining the existing restrictions on migrant workers regarding work permit category and length of stay. Such review to be completed and published by June 2027, with any necessary legislative or policy changes presented to the States Assembly by December 2027. And B, undertake an examination of the employer pays principle as set out by the International Labour Organization and produce a roadmap for implementation of the principle in the island by June 2027, ensuring that recruitment fees and related costs for the employment of migrant workers are not collected from the workers themselves, either directly or indirectly.
Deputy Poré.
Thank you, sir.
and thank you, members. Today, I would like to bring to your attention an issue that sits at the center of our economical needs, our workforce strategy and our responsibility to uphold fairness and dignity in the workplace. Migrant workers, sir, they are the clogs that keep the wheels turning. Without workers, the great majority of businesses in the island would fold. Let's not be under any misunderstanding. The island needs migrant workers, and we should be grateful to have them here, helping with our economical sustainability. But Jersey also needs a functioning, fair system that supports workforce stability and long-term competitiveness. I would like to make it clear that this proposition is not anti-businesses. It is about sustainability. A fair system where good employers can operate within should also be a system where bad employers cannot exploit. Seasonal migrant workers are in the forefront of my proposition. They play a vital role in supporting our industries, particularly agriculture, hospitality, and small businesses that rely on short-term labor. They really keep us going. They do the jobs that most residents would not do, and many live and work in conditions that most of us would not accept it in this day and age, and rightfully so. They come and work each season until we tell them to leave for a short while, before allowing them back again, if they are lucky. They don't demand for anything, they get their heads down and they work. They pay their contributions and they keep their heads down. They are afraid to complain when their needs are not met, because the consequences of doing so could cost them their job and affect the rest of their lives. I am almost sure that 90% of us would not be prepared to work for years on end in a different country where most of the time you cannot spend time with your family or loved ones, where everything you know and are accustomed to is different, where you are only too aware that you don't belong, but still you must return because the country where you come from, without fault of your own, does not provide for a decent quality of life for you and for your family. It is hard, sir. I know that because I have done it twice. Migrant workers come here to try and better their lives, but that does not mean that they should be open to abuse and left without care and protection. The same care and protection that all other workers in the islands benefit from. Even though they are invited here to work and they come with skills and qualifications in their many areas of employment, they still do not benefit from the same workers' rights as all workers in Jersey. Jersey needs the support of migrant workers, sir. They are our lifeline that keeps on giving. Yet, under our current work permit policy, there exists a significant imbalance of power between the employer and the seasonal worker. This imbalance of power can, and in many times does, exposes workers to conditions that are harmful to their well-being, dignity, and autonomy. The imbalance of power, which is determined by our present work permit policy, is described under the modern-day slavery as conditions that promote and consent for employers' behaviors that keep workers in positions of vulnerability, dependency, and lack of free will. Following the two recent high-profile cases that lift the lid on the precariousness and lack of protection migrant workers are exposed to, I have been relieved and happy to finally hear our Chief Minister announcement that the government intends to introduce a dedicated modern-day slavery definition in Jersey. I have had a meeting recently with the Chief Minister regarding this announcement, and have been reassured that government officers are already in line to start the work. And if I'm correct in saying, sir, the modern-day slavery definition should be part of the policy by the end of 2026. This is a much-needed step forward to properly address the many issues workers are having in their workplaces. The power imbalance between employer and employee. The proposition calls for changes that ensure that any sort of servitude and debt bondage unintended consequences are removed from our work permit policy. Jersey workforce landscape is much different now than it was before the UK cancelled its membership with the European Union. In the past few years, Jersey has been struggling to keep its population here due to many factors. Some of our migrant European workforce have also left, and currently we have a deficit of homegrown labour. As well as losing out on assessing workers from European countries and from countries where cultural values and physical attributions are more aligned to island people, Jersey now has taken a different route and is inviting workers over from African countries, the Caribbean islands, and the Philippines to support us with our seasonal industries. It is worth to mention, sir, that Jersey's GDP per capita significantly exceeds the GDP per capita of countries such as Kenya, Rwanda, Ghana, Caribbean islands, and the Philippines, and many other emerging countries that Jersey is currently recruiting workforce from. This is an important point, sir, because when workers come to Jersey to start a job, they are already so much further behind financially compared to the great majority of Jersey residents. For Jersey to have continuity of competitiveness in our many industry areas, it needs the continuous support and influx of migrant workers. And to encourage the best workers we can to come over and provide the island with the much needed support for our economical sustainability, Jersey needs to bring forward in equal measures a policy that supports local businesses, but it also provides protection to migrant workers, protection that focuses on their welfare and their well-being. It is about bringing forward a better balanced policy that supports both employees and employers. We currently do not have such measured policies, sir. To strengthen migrant workers' protection through the work permit policy, it is not only a moral responsibility, but it is the right thing to do. It reflects the island's commitment to treating all workers with dignity and respect. This is a fundamental human rights principle, sir. But I cannot speak only on behalf of workers. I do acknowledge the genuine concern of local businesses. This is not about taking away business from businesses. I run a small business, and so does my husband and my son. I know firsthand that many employers are already feeling the pressure of labor shortages, operational costs, and the risk of unintended consequences from any policy changes that could add extra burden. These concerns are valid, and they need to be taken seriously. Any improvement to migrant workers' protection should be designed in close partnership with employers, ensuring that reforms are practical, balanced, and sensitive to the realities of running a business in this island. The aim of my proposition is to develop a work permit policy framework that supports both workers' welfare and businesses' sustainability. One that strengthens our reputation as a fair and attractive jurisdiction where people choose to come and work, By working collaboratively, we can create an employment system that protects those who contribute so much to our island while ensuring that business continue to thrive. My proposition comes in two parts. Part A calls for a policy change after a review is conducted. Only Part A of this proposition, as amended, carries the requirement to make any legislative changes. Again, it calls for a review. It is not a conclusion. A review that asks, are we willing to examine whether our current system is working as intended or whether it is unintentionally creating risks for workers? Part B calls for an examination of the employer's play principle with the view to implementing it as a best practice. So a bit more about Part A. Part A seeks to eliminate the servitude aspect from our policy. The fact that work permits is written in the name of the employer rather than the employee, it is the main reason for workers to experience and feel that they do not have free will of movement or autonomy. According to the modern-day slavery strands, this aspect of the policy keeps workers into servitude. Workers are attached to the employer through that simple but very effective way of keeping them under control and dependent on the employer in all aspects of their work and living experiences in Jersey. It is a control mechanism, sir, that it is dated and does not treat all humans in this island as equals. Part A has been amended after constructive discussions I have had with both the Home Affairs Minister and the Immigration Department. And I would like to thank the Minister and the Head of Immigration for their constructive meetings that we have had. One of the conclusions I came to during our discussion is that both the Minister and the Head of Immigration agree with me that it is time for things to change. Our differences are based on how those changes should come about. I am pleased to say that we agree on the issues that affect migrant workers the most and how they need to change. The compromise that came from our meetings was that both the Minister and the Head of Immigration feel that it is necessary to have a full review of the work permit policy to find the best way forward to improve it and to include protection for workers. It is a good compromise, in my view, and I am happy with it, as the review will allow for a full consultation involving all parties on this issue to have their voices and concerns heard. I believe that the Home Affairs Minister and the Immigration Department are in support of Part A, but not so much of Part B. And I do urge members to exercise your free will on Part B. So, Part B focuses on another aspect of the work permit policy, which is debt bondage. It calls for an examination, and I must stress, not a review, but an examination of the employer's pay principle as it's set out by the International Labour Organization. Part B asks that after the examination is conducted, that the Department of Immigration produces a roadmap for its implementation. I am very aware, sir, and members may also already have concluded that the employer's pay principle is just that. It is a principle. Again, it asks the Minister to undertake an overdue examination of how these principles can be applied in the island and to produce a roadmap to set out the steps for its implementation. I believe that the work permit policy has already adopted some of the principles, but he has not gone far enough. If members remember earlier in my speech, I mentioned that Jersey GDP per capita is so much higher than the GDP per capita from countries that we are currently recruiting from. This makes value for money for Jersey, for sure, but it is such a financial burden for workers. The costs of applying for a job and for all the requirements needed for them to travel over are astronomical for them. Many workers, before they get here, they are already in so much debt, sir. They either borrow from family members or loan sharks, or they owe the money to the employers who pay the costs up front and later will deduct it from the worker's salary as per agreement. And this leaves workers debt bond. Again, this is a strand of modern-day slavery, and we do have this in Jersey. Sorry, sir. Part B is not a request for a blanket application of the principles. It is a request for the minister to undertake an examination of the employer's pay principle and to produce a roadmap with the island needs in mind for the implementation of best practice of the principle moving forward. Thank you. Sorry. I hope that members have had an opportunity to read the employer's pay principle, which is attached on the body of the proposition. At the core of the principle, it states, no worker or job seeker should be charged directly or indirectly, in whole or in part, any fees or related costs to their recruitment. Instead, all recruitment-related costs should be borne by the employer, who benefits from the privilege of competing in the global world for workers. And this is really important. We are now competing for workers. Okay? And the global competition is rising for workers. We get going further afield to find them. It goes further to say that this principle is fundamental to combating exploitation, forced labor, and human trafficking, particularly among migrant workers who are often forced into debt bondage by high recruitment fees. This act aligns with international labor standards and the human rights framework. The International Labour Organization states that labor is not a commodity and urges governments to strengthen their law to hold employers and recruiters liable for those costs and encourage businesses to adopt these practices throughout their supply chain. IOL also supports the United Nations Guiding Principle on Businesses and Human Rights, which calls for the prevention of human rights abuse in the supply chain. The principle was initially driven by multinational corporations and labor bodies who sourced migrant workers from lower economic countries and understood that there was a need to protect workers who from the outset are economically in greater vulnerability in comparison to the countries they work for. And due to their vulnerability, they are open to abuse and to exploitation. Many countries in Southeast Asia, North Africa, Canada, and Europe are adopting it as best practice to prevent modern-day slavery from taking place. Presently, there are around 25 European countries that apply some form of the principle and have prohibited any recruitment or travel fees. Countries such as Germany and Sweden have brought in laws that empowers the government to force recruiters to reimburse the monies already collected from the workers back to them. The employer's pay principle, sir, has many positive benefits to countries who adopt their best practice. It enhances a country's international reputation for embracing fair recruitment policies. It supports sustainability and transparency in labour markets and ethical practices in both domestic and transnational recruitment systems. To accept Part B, sir, of my proposition is the right thing to do, not only from a moral point of view, but also because it enhances our economic and strategic position in the international marketplace arena. It is not about applying unnecessary charges to the employer. It is more about understanding where are we currently recruiting workers from, understand their economical disadvantage from the outset, understanding the consequences that our current ill-thought-through work permit policy has on migrant workers, and how many workers are currently suffering the consequences of a policy that is, at the best, exploitative and disadvantage further those who have the least. Jersey can agree to choose to join countries who are leading on the best way forward and who apply best practice when it comes to the treatment of migrant workers. Or we can reject Part B and risk to be identified as a jurisdiction that gives as little as possible to workers while exposing them to unnecessary vulnerability. So I'm just going to share a very small story to try and illustrate the issue I'm trying to bring to light in the Assembly. I have given a false name to the particular person, the main person on this story, just to protect his identity. And I will call it Paul's story. Paul was a Kenyan worker. He came to Jersey for what it should have been 9 months contract with the construction industry. His seasonal contract was from March to November. Paul had never left his country before. He was full of hope and anticipation to be coming to work in Jersey. He would finally have an opportunity to better his life and the lives of his family, children, and elderly parents. Unfortunately, Paul did not arrive here until May, and that was due to delays with issuing documents and immigration applications. By the time Paul got here, ready to start his job, he was in debt for more than £4,000. Paul struggled to settle in Jersey. His mindset was one of constant worry about his finances, and it should have been the opposite. He came here to better his life. He was stressed about how long was going to take him to pay for his debt before he could start saving and send money back to his family, especially because his employer did not honor his contract. And instead of working 45 hours per week, Paul was only working 32 hours per week on a minimum wage. His employer kept telling him that the work was dying out. Paul could not try and access any extra part-time work to supplement his income, as the work permit policy did not allow for that. Unfortunately, things got worse for Paul, as the construction company he worked for told him that his position was only available until the end of August. He could not try and apply for another job and stay until November because he was not allowed to do so according to the work permit policy. His family back home were being treated by some people in their village who had not received the payment back from the loan they had gave to the family. When I met Paul, he was really, really struggling. I don't often see grown men crying, but Paul did cry. He spoke about concerns for his family's safety, spoke about how he ended up in the situation, and spoke about the fact that he came here to better his life, but was in so much debt that he wished he had never come here. In essence, sir, Paul came over for a job that was meant to give him a better life quality, but in the process of getting here, Paul incurred a great amount of debt. And these job circumstances made it even worse. Sorry. For God's sake. Sorry, sir.
Don't worry.
Okay. I will not share the end of Paul's story because it is too upsetting for me to tell the Assembly. But it wasn't a good story and not a good end. I just really wanted to illustrate the debt situation when we have migrant workers coming here. Sir, I do not know of any other area of employment in the island where workers have to pay up front and get into debt before they can even start a job. It is a unique set of circumstances and only applies to seasonal migrant workers. Coincidentally, migrant workers are the lowest paid workers in Jersey. If we are not exploiting their already vulnerable status, I don't know what to call it. In conclusion, sir, as an Assembly, we need to not only move forward with definition of modern-day slavery, but change the entire narrative through the rebalancing of power between the employer and the employer. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the proposition seconded? Yes, sir. Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on the proposition? Yes, Deputy Legra.
Thank you, sir. I was pleased to work alongside the proposer of this proposition, Deputy Porre, as part of the work permit holder welfare review scrutiny panel at the start of this political term before I joined government. That gave me valuable insight into the issues faced by those who come to our island to work, often leaving families, communities and support networks behind. Members will know that the Deputy has been a consistent advocate for the migrant worker community since being elected to the Assembly 4 years ago. She has spoken frequently and passionately on behalf of those who may not always feel they have a voice in our political processes, and I want to acknowledge that work today. Since becoming Minister, I've worked hard with the Customs and Immigration Service to drive improvements in relation to the welfare of the work permit holders. We have made progress, sir, but there is more that can be done and more that needs to be done. For many years, we have relied on work permit policy that was developed in large part in the 1990s, with reactive changes and incremental improvements added over decades. But the island has changed significantly, not just since the 1990s, but in the last 5 years alone. Our employment landscape is different, with some significant gaps, challenges and pressures. Post-Brexit, the island's attractiveness to workers from abroad has also shifted. In recent years, we have welcomed individuals from a wider range of countries and regions than we ever did before. Unlike EU citizens prior to 2020, who were able to live and work here without immigration control, these workers are required to have work permits. They enter a more formal immigration system with clearer rules and responsibilities, and that system must be robust, fair and fit for purpose. As a result, we now have a much higher number of workers with immigration permissions issued under the work permit policy. To illustrate this change, sir, in 2020, 397 work permits were issued. By 2024, that number had increased to over 3,000. This represents not only a significant administrative increase, but a fundamental shift in the composition of our workforce. It is right in that context that we ensure the work permit policy is meeting the needs of the island while upholding the highest possible standards in relation to the welfare of those who come to work here. That may require changing our approach in certain areas and modernising parts of the system. It is recognised that the time has come to look again at our work permit system and consider whether some more fundamental changes are needed. I am therefore grateful to the Deputy for amending her proposition. As she rightly explained, her, myself and the Immigration Department have met on a number of occasions, so that Part A provides the commissioning of an independent review of the work permit policy. This will include consideration of the continued appropriateness of the work permits being issued to the employer rather than the employee. That is a significant question, and it is right that it is examined thoroughly and impartially. I want to make it clear with members that such a review would not be limited to this single issue. It would look comprehensively at all aspects of the policy. The department is already undertaking work to scope out the terms of that review and to identify a suitable independent reviewer with the necessary experience. Sir, I am therefore pleased to accept Part A of the Deputy's amendment. I will now turn to Part B, which I do not feel able to accept, and I hope the Deputy will allow the debate to be taken in parts. Part B relates to the employer pays principle and would mandate that this principle must be implemented in the island by June 2027. While I agree that there is merit in examining the costs incurred by those coming to work in Jersey, my principal concern with this part is that it presupposes the outcome of the review. The whole purpose of commissioning an independent review is to ensure that we base decisions on evidence, data, and the insight on those affected without predetermining conclusions. That said, I do believe that there is real value in taking a serious look at the financial burden placed on migrant workers and the potentially negative consequences that can arise. We must remain vigilant for signs of exploitation in this community. Debt bondage, where a worker becomes trapped in employment because of the costs they have incurred to take up that job, is one such risk, and we must be proactive in mitigating it. Since 2024, the work permit policy has explicitly prevented employers from passing recruitment costs onto work permit fees to employees, directly or indirectly. That was a significant step forward. However, it is still currently permissible for work permit holders to be expected to meet their travel costs and visa costs. That may be an area where we need further reflection, and we need further consultation with all those parties. Alongside this, we have committed to bringing forward modern-day slavery protections in Jersey. These reforms are essential if we are to provide the safeguards and legal frameworks that migrant workers deserve. This means that we will have two significant pieces of work underway, one concerning the work permit policy and the other modern-day slavery. So I would also like to highlight some of the concerns that were raised in the Deputy's speech in relation to the ability for a worker to now have and take on extra employment, and those rules have changed in order that someone can now do that. But more importantly as well, sir, if someone signs a contract in their home country, when they arrive here, that contract has to be honoured, because that is based in employment law. So those things cannot be changed, sir. For that reason, sir, I cannot accept Part B of the Deputy's proposition today. We should allow the review to conclude so that any decisions we take are fully informed, coherent, and avoid unintended negative consequences. Sir, I am committed, as is the Customs and Immigration Service, to ensuring that work permit holders who make a significant contribution to our island's life and economy are treated with fairness, dignity and respect. By accepting Part A of this proposition, we can make progress in this direction. So I am already aware that there are certain parts of our industries that do already pay some of the travel for the work permit holders that come to the island. But as I said, sir, I think for us to make that fundamental change, we need to have proper consultation. So there is something else that I would like to also raise here, which is sort of relevant but not, is to say to people in our community, because there seems to be a misunderstanding, sir, and I would like to clarify it. Work permit holders cannot be deported, sir, because it seems to be that we have come in a community, people are feared of being deported. Someone cannot be deported from the island unless they have been dealt with through the court in relation to a criminal offence and they've received a sentence of 3 months or more. They cannot be deported in relation to having their work permit withdrawn. They will, because they haven't got a work permit, not be able to remain on the island and may have to leave. Deportation is something whereby a person can never come back to the island. They are deported, they can't come back here on holiday unless that deportation is withdrawn. Someone that leaves the island in other ways can reapply for a job here and can revisit the island. And I wanted to make that distinction, sir, because there's much said about the fact of people fearing that they're going to be deported. Customs and immigration do not deport people, sir, and I wanted to make that quite clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
A point of clarification, please, sir.
Will you give way to point of clarification, Minister?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Just to be sure I answer the Minister correctly, Part B of the proposition begins to undertake an examination of the employer pays principle. Stopping that clause there, is the Minister saying that that aspect will in fact be dealt with in the context of Part A, which she agrees with?
Yes, sir. To clarify, Part A should include all of those factors in order that we are not preempting the result of the review. And that review needs to take consideration of the workers alongside all of the other the businesses and everyone that's involved in this situation.
Thank the Minister.
Thank you. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I'm sure that members will not be surprised that I'm speaking on this proposition because I was speaking about for the last 7 years on that. And I'm really grateful to Deputy Porrer bringing it to the debate to this assembly. I didn't, because every time I felt we tried to sort out one case, another case, and another case. And every time I needed to ask to be listened, to favors, to look into the law, to look, it's not favor for me, but please, 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 there is an option for the person. And I feel, well, I'm passionate about it, and this is why I'm grateful for Conor Tab of St. Mary asking this question, because if you are looking at Point B, undertakes the examination, if it will be included, why we are declining Part B. I'm not sure if the Conor Tab remember case 2021 when he was currently involved as a deputy of St. Mary, and actually Deputy Lewis. I've gone back to the history and I found exchanges that we had in July, August 2021. It's the situation that Deputy Porrer brought to our attention and the name Paul. We dealt with this situation in 2021 with 20 workers that were employed by agricultural company that paid for their visas, they paid for their flights, they arrived to the island, and some of them, most of them, within 4 weeks, been told, we don't have any more work for you, go back. 20. Ministers were involved, deputies were involved, senior officers were involved. I looked through the trail of the emails, and by the way, there was from agriculture, there was other company who would offer place for 2-4, but not for all 20. We're talking about 2021, we had still COVID restrictions, and hospitality were crying out for staff, but they cannot change the place, and they were expected, we would be happy to be employed by somebody else. They came on 9 months seasonal visa, and they were not from communities that we have now. It was before Brexit. The problem that I have to continue say we'll not examine it proper part B, it's not a time, when it is the time. Because if you speak with the Portuguese community, if you speak with the Polish community, if you speak with the Romanian community, I can go on and on and on and on. It doesn't matter where you came from as a migrant worker, seasonal worker, to work in agriculture, hospitality, they all experience exactly the same problems, regardless where did they came from. I do be honest, I'm really grateful that time for all people who were involved, and it took 2 weeks, and some people were allowed to stay, and some people already bought their ticket, and some people left. It was really dealt, but basically, if we have people already here, ready to work, why we would not allow workforce to support sectors that are in need? 5 years on, multiple conversation, and still system doesn't work. And this is the issue, that system is rigid and system doesn't want to move quickly. It's correctly that the minister said they will not deport it, but in the emails, if they would stay, they would become illegal. So it's not, it doesn't matter if they will be deported or if their job would be lost and visa cancelled, they would become illegal, and if they will stay on New Jersey, they will become illegal, they will break the law, and they will be deported. So whatever way we are going around, the result is the same. And for me, it's introducing fair, structured pathway that we have. And this is what Deputy Poro requested in Part B, to examine. It's for us, it's to raise standard, not because when workers cannot move, good employers will undercut the bad ones. There is lots of situations that we can go around this situation. But the most important that we do recognize the value of those workers. Think about in other sectors. We states of Jersey, we're signing the contract, we pay a really nice relocation package for attract our employees to come to work on the island. In finance, in professional service, we always see good relocation packages paid by employees, which is employer choice, where you can say we don't need to tell to the employer what to do. Flights are covered, accommodations are covered, costs are supported, cost absorbed. And when we're talking about people who are often on minimum wage, they expect to pay to come. They hardly can, the first two, I remember that time in 2021, we did a calculation for the first 3 months of their visa, they need to work to recover the cost. And another 6 months, it's to cover the cost, whatever the expenses plus maybe to do. Because they're not coming to settle here, they will not benefit from our system. They come here to ensure that they can earn money to support their family there. We are not giving them options to settle here and to enjoy all our system. So for me, it's to build the fairness from the start. And this proposition does exactly that. If I wouldn't be involved for the last 7 years, I would say, let's continue with the review. But we are already having a review. Let's just examine it. And I'm really, really grateful again to Deputy Pori that we are finally having a debate and not just conversations in the offices. And I'll be supporting both parts. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Julie Kobach.
Thank you, sir. I stand here not just a member, but as someone who has lived parts of such bad experiences as a Romanian migrant, and that was between the lucky ones that probably didn't have it as bad as others, because I always stood up to injustice, no matter who I had in front of me or how unpopular this was, and no matter the consequences. But not everyone is able to do that or stand up for themselves without considering those consequences. My sister remembers it even more harshly, as she came to this island when work permits were in place before 2007 for EU nationals. She was among the first Romanians here. We both remember the feeling of being at times discriminated, mistreated, living in poor conditions, and having our rights disregarded, like many other migrants of different nationalities. And 20 years later, Unfortunately, although not as often as before, there are still many similar worrying cases that can easily occur under the existing work permit system, which ties employees to employers and leaves them with little ability to escape when those employers prove to be bad. Call it modern slavery, call it discrimination, call it wrongdoing, however you label it, it exists. It must be acknowledged and resolved. Over the past 2 years, this has become increasingly clear through recent review reports and court cases coming to light. While these issues were already known, their full extent has only recently been revealed with greater clarity and evidence. We can no longer afford to ignore them. Migrants come for opportunity, for experiences, but opportunities should never come with fear. Because when your right to stay depends on one employer, something changes. You don't speak up, you don't question. Being far from home and your loved ones, you endure, not because you want to, but because you feel you have no choice. And that is the reality. We are told this system does not create control, but control does not need to be written in law to be real. When your visa, your home, and your stability are all tied together, the balance is already gone. And we know where that can lead. We've heard the stories. People pushed to the edge, even to suicide by pressure and isolation. Some are living in conditions no one here would accept, forcing them into dangerous improvisations just to improve their living conditions, sometimes with fatal consequences. We've seen exploitation in many forms. So how long will we allow this to continue? Because we already know what holds people there. It is not just the job, it is the debt, recruitment fees, travel costs, hidden charges. That is the chain. Internationally, including through the International Labour Organization, this is recognized as a key driver of exploitation. So we cannot say there is no evidence. We already have it. The question is whether we act on it. That is why the employer pays principle matters. It is simple. If a business needs a worker, the business pays, not the worker. And there are measures that the government can also bring to ease these employer costs. We understand that employers may worry about paying recruitment and visa costs upfront, only for a worker to leave soon after arriving. The roadmap and proposed safeguards address this. Measures can include minimum probation periods, notification requirements for changing jobs, and compliance checks, so workers cannot exploit the system without consequence. At the same time, employers who meet their obligations in good faith are fully protected. This ensures that fairness works both ways. Migrant workers are not trapped in debt or exploitation, and employers are not unfairly penalized for doing everything correctly. The goal is a system that encourages responsible hiring and responsible employment, balancing protection for both parties. I have heard from the Minister during some questions in previous state sitting that the International Cultural Center already supports migrant workers with such aspects, and I fully agree that the work and existence of the Jersey ICC is important. Its continued operation, especially after the change of government, came only after sustained pressure of about a year from myself, Deputy Alves, Deputy Garner, and Deputy Pori as members of ICC, who collectively urged the Chief Minister and the Council of Ministers to reinstate it, and what if a next assembly has to be again pushed for it to continue existing. While the ICC is trusted by migrant workers and plays a vital role in signposting them to the right services and right people for support, it is not a decision-making body. It cannot directly change the policies or systems that affect migrant workers. That responsibility still rests with the minister. That is why we need decisive action without further delay to address the structural issues that leave workers vulnerable. Now we hear concerns that this is too early, that it predecises the outcome. But a roadmap is not direct implementation. It is indeed a review along the way and planning. It is how you do this properly. We must wait for further review reports and evidence, though there is already strong evidence on what affects migrant workers the worst. This amendment does not bypass the review. It complements it and ensures we do not just review endlessly without preparing solutions. The Part BM is not amended. We hear concerns about business, but good business already acts fairly. A system that depends on workers paying to work is not strong, it's fragile. And I repeat that. A system that depends on workers paying to work is not strong, it is fragile. Fairness strengthens the economy. We hear that workers can already change jobs, but on paper, that is not the same as in reality. If someone is in debt, tied to housing, or uncertain about their status, they are far less likely to leave. Mobility in policy does not always mean mobility in real life. We hear it is not legally required, but not everything that is right is legally required. Leadership means choosing to do the right thing, not just the minimum required. We hear about unintended consequences, but there are already consequences today, real ones. Workers in debt, workers afraid to speak. Doing nothing is not neutral, it is still a decision. And we hear this is rushing, but this is not rushing. This is a roadmap by 2027. That is time to consult, to plan, to implement properly. If that is too fast, then we risk never acting at all. The amendment brought by the Deputy to her own proposition was already a compromise. It was softened and adjusted to allow flexibility. And to my understanding, that came through engagement with the Minister and her officers, who then changed their mind again. So to summarize, what the proposal argues is that the current employer-type permit system can create conditions similar to servitude. Recruitment debt contributes to modern slavery risks, but also the risk mentioned by others if these changes are already considered and mitigated within the proposal and shouldn't be implied they are not. The change is structural but limited. Immigration safeguards remain. The goal is not open labor mobility, but human reform with existing controls. This is not about removing controls. It is not about opening the system. It is about fairness, about balance, about recognizing that behind every permit is a person, a life, a story, a journey. If we cannot even commit to a roadmap to fix a system we know is broken, then when will we ever choose fairness over fear? It is time to act now. Support this proposal in its entirety, support fairness, support dignity, and stop kicking the can into the next assembly, which may or may not prioritize it. Otherwise, you risk becoming complicit in allowing our migrant workers to continue being treated as second-class citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. And just to correct the record, the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs is the main
Yes,
responder.
you're quite right, yes. Thank you.
So you can switch the clock on for me. So to return to the proposition. If recent events have taught us anything, sir, it is that those who come to work here, and particularly those who come as temporary workers, deserve to be treated with dignity and respect and to live in a safe and secure environment. Temporary workers support the life of the island in many different ways, and we have many reasons to be grateful to them for the work that they do. And as Deputy Porre so rightly stated, we must remember that we are in a global marketplace and we rely on these workers to come and work in some really important industries for our island, such as the care sector, the hospitality sector, and the agricultural sector. Part of ensuring fair treatment is having a work permit policy that is fit for purpose, and I welcome the proposals for a review of the current arrangements, and I thank Deputy Porre for her initiative, and also to the Home Affairs Minister for accepting the Deputy's amendment to Part A of the proposition, which I also support. With regard to Part B, whilst I understand where the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs is coming from, I have come to a different conclusion, and I will be supporting Deputy Porre's Part B as amended. I am confident that the Minister's review under Part A will examine the issue of fees and other employment-related costs. But to me, the employer pays principle is separate and important safeguard. Migrant workers should not be saddled by incurring large debts before they even start working in Jersey or even set foot on the island. I appreciate that some members may be concerned that some local employers might struggle to meet all the costs associated with overseas recruitment. However, my understanding is that we are being asked to commit to a voluntary principle which sets the gold standard for employer behaviour. And so the term gold standard for employer behaviour reminds me of when I was on the migrant worker panel that Deputy Porre chaired, and we heard directly from employer representatives who told us that they wanted to be seen as gold standard employers for their industries, and they wanted that gold standard to happen in their industries. Also, sir, I'm conscious that other governments already insist that governments that they are sending their citizens to do meet the employer paid principle. A good example of this is the Philippines government, which already insists that the principle is met in relation to their citizens coming to the island. I'm also mindful that larger supermarkets supplied by our agricultural sector have signed up to the principle already, and they also expect that their suppliers will meet the principle as well. Sir, I strongly believe that recruitment fees and charges should never be borne by the worker. I note that this is included in the current work permit policy, which states that the employer is responsible for covering any work permit and recruitment agency costs. An employer cannot deduct work permit and recruitment agency costs from the employee's wages. Sir, I urge the Minister and the future government to ensure that this element of the current policy is strictly enforced to avoid the type of situation that Deputy Porre referred to in her opening speech. So to sum up, I hope that members can agree to support Part B and send migrant workers a very clear message as to where this Assembly sets the moral bar for employer behaviour. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Taddeo.
So thank you. First of all, I'd just like to thank Deputy Porre for bringing this to the Assembly. I was pleased to be able to work as part of her original scrutiny panel back from 2002, which actually did feature Deputy Feltham and I think the current Home Affairs Minister, Deputy Lehegerat, and the Constable of St Clements, if I remember rightly. And I think that Deputy Porre identified very early on an urgent issue, I think, which many of us knew about. I remember before 2022, maybe even in that year, that we came across, I was made aware of the situation of some Russian farm workers who had signed up to work here for a summer, and that they found out that basically the work that they'd come over for had dried up, and so they were left pretty much with nothing left to do. And although legally they weren't being deported, and I think it's useful that the Home Affairs Minister has differentiated for us what legal deportation is versus what administrative removal is, I think the common understanding of the word is that it probably felt very much like they were being threatened with the deportation. And I think in that case, some time was able to be bought for them to see if they could work somewhere else. But it does very much feel that there is an asymmetric relationship currently, especially in some sectors, when it comes to work permit holders, sir. And although we do often pride ourselves on having some very sensitive and debates in this Assembly, even when they're contentious, unfortunately, the kind of dialogue and narrative that we get on social media is not the case. And I was really saddened to see that even in recent reporting that where the Deputy was being interviewed, some of the quite frankly racist and prejudiced language that does emanate from many social media groups, which I'm frankly surprised at, because even the standards that the groups sign themselves up to, the administrators should be straight onto that, sir. And indeed, some of the comments may have even been a breach of the law, taking free speech far beyond its excesses, sir. This is the kind of world we're still living in, and that work permit holders still have to contend with, even in 2026, when so much of, I hope, the mainstream of society has become much more, not just tolerant, but actually much more welcoming still in our small island, sir. So when it comes to Part B, I think that's where some of the debate has been had, and I was pleased to note that the Social Security Minister has come to a different conclusion to her Home Affairs colleague. And I think she is right to do that, because what Part B is really asking to do is to accept that there is already a model for good practice and a gold standard in this area, as outlined by the International Labour Organization and adopted by other organisations. And the Deputy Poirier is simply asking for an examination to be undertaken to produce a roadmap for the implementation of the principle outlined in that by 2027, and to ensure that the recruitment fees and related costs of employment workers are not collected from the workers themselves, but either indirectly or directly. And the reason that's so important is that when it comes to notions of modern-day slavery, either in fact or that border it, is that is one of the key areas where there is an issue. It can be that workers, we know we've heard so many stories that they come to the island and they're already in debt and they remain effectively in a situation of indentured labour, where we don't know the full circumstances of the way that they might have been brought here. It may be that a lot of their wages are being sent back, not necessarily to their families, but actually to pay extortionate rates to the people who brought them over, which may be far beyond actually the real costs of what it costs them to be here, and they end up in a situation of spiralling debt. And I think that's one of the key reasons to make sure that Jersey has no part of that, either by omission or by commission, sir. So I think it's really important that Deputy Poirier has highlighted that and that we do accept it. But more broadly, there are also VORG issues in here, and I don't know if we've fully touched on them. I think the Deputy may have in her opening remarks. But we have to remember that VORG issues are not just, don't just affect women who are necessarily born in Jersey, who live in Jersey in a mainstream, sir, but that immigrant and work permit holders are particularly susceptible to sexual abuse also in the workplace, especially if they feel that they can't leave and it is being perpetrated by or on the part of the employer. So they may be unwilling to speak up, especially if they don't realise that they have certain rights under the law because they're not generally protected when it comes to unfair dismissal, although they will, of course, be when it comes to anti-discrimination legislation. This won't necessarily be made aware to them, and even if they are aware of that, there may still be that fear. So this is very much a layered problem which particularly affects those minorities. So it may interest members that I do have some experience of being a work permit holder myself. So when I was in my early 20s, I spent 2 occasions à l'étranger, where I needed to get, on one occasion only, a work permit to work in France. I was actually working on one occasion in La Réunion, which is a small island about 500 miles east of Madagascar and about 100 miles away from Mauritius. And on that occasion, I was actually just allowed to enter. I've got to make sure I get my timings right. I was there first as a student, and then I was there later on as a 25-year-old. But in the meantime, I'd also been to Martinique in the Caribbean. I had a difficult life in my 20s, I must admit, sir, and much pleased to be here. Yeah, and since. And strangely enough, because of the arbitrary nature of European administrative bureaucracy, I was required when I went to Martinique to get a work permit, because they looked at my passport and they said, oh, you're not a European citizen, therefore you need to get a work permit. So I had to trot off to London, sir. I had to wait for my visa, and then when I got to Martinique, I had to get my work permit. And what that meant in real terms is that I had to go through an administrative process. And I got to Martinique and I went down to the hospital because I was required to get an x-ray of my chest, presumably to make sure I didn't have tuberculosis or something like that. And the humiliation of it, so I had to share a waiting room with some Americans. So my European status was definitely not recognised in that regard, sir. So we were brothers and sisters in arms, perhaps not, but we were under the same plight, sir. And then I had to actually register for a mutuelle. So I can't remember exactly what the social security situation was in France, but I seem to remember being told that if you get sick, because you're only here for 6 to 9 months, that you will get treatment, but you will have to cover the gap yourself. So you would need to sign up for a private insurance, and that will make sure that actually you're fully covered, but you'll be paying this mutuelle out of your social security contribution. So it was a very slick process. even though there was some administrative burden on my part and on the employer's part, sir. But it did mean that I could go into that situation as a professional where I was working, teaching other teachers, so to speak, English, and I knew that I was covered. I knew that the social security contributions that I was paying had some meaningful effect. I never needed to use it, but I know that others might have, sir. Interestingly enough, the second time I applied to work in La Réunion, they said, no, it's fine, you're British, you don't need to worry about that. So I took that down and marked that down as a win, sir. So we do find ourselves as world citizens often at the whims of arbitrary administration, and we don't choose this, whether we're locals or whether we're travelling. And I do note that there has been some comment, I think, in the paper, actually, that Deputy Porre has written. Work permit holders and economic migrants are often disparaged. They're only here for the money. Well, I think we're only here, not us here, of course, we do this job for much more lofty ideals than that. But I think most workers work for the money because they need to survive. So it doesn't matter whether you've come to Jersey to work or you find yourself in Jersey to work, we all need to survive. And we do want to make sure that everybody's treated correctly, sir. And I think what Deputy Porre has highlighted in this proposition in both parts should be widely commended and should be fully adopted by this Assembly, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Barbara Ward.
Thank you, sir. There's something I've always... Thank you, sir. There's always something that's always been found very curious, that when we have temporary and seasonal workers, and they do pay tax, some of them, that they also have to pay long-term care contributions. Surely, sir, this is actually, this deduction that is set by the government should not be implemented on people who would never be able to benefit from this, having made contributions. I may be wrong in what I'm saying, and I look to the proposer if she could maybe confirm that long-term care is actually paid by seasonal and temporary workers. And if so, therefore maybe the government should lead the way in applying a fair treatment to our seasonal and temporary workers by ceasing this long-term care deduction on these type of workers, because they'll never be able to benefit. They can benefit from the social security contributions, and that is absolutely right. But long-term care, when you look at the qualifying period to be able to get it, they will never, ever, ever be able to qualify for that, sir. I look to the proposer to guide me on that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the proposition? No one else wishes. Deputy Messick.
Thank you, sir. Like other members who've spoken, I of course absolutely commend Deputy Porre for not just bringing this proposition, but for her diligent and tenacious work in this term of office to highlight the plight of migrant workers in Jersey and everything that she has done for that. I worked closely with Deputy Porre on the last election campaign as we were running in the same constituency, and I know that this is not necessarily the issue that convinced her to want to stand for election and be a part of this assembly, but no doubt many of the testimonies that she heard upon becoming a States member and the trust that she was held in by many migrant workers in Jersey has contributed to her, I think, being a shining light on this subject and actually doing the island a real favour by highlighting these issues, because I certainly can't remember in my time in politics where that part of our community has really been considered in much of our policy making, and it's absolutely vital that they are. And though our society is made up of people from different walks of life, including those who are Jersey born with generations going back here hundreds of years to those who have arrived more recently, everyone who is living in this island is entitled to equal rights, decency and respect, and to be treated well at work. And speaking as somebody who was born on the island and who has been lucky to enjoy a good life here, I do not believe in a Jersey where our happiness and prosperity should ever be built upon the unhappiness and exploitation of others, no matter what that would do for the quality of life for those living here. That is an absolute point of principle that we should never renege on. And that's why those who come to the island to work here, who we know provide that crucial economic benefit to the island, should be treated with dignity and respect, and they should have full rights in the law. I'm very pleased that we find ourselves in the situation we do with Part A of the amended proposition, that Deputy Poirier has worked with others behind the scenes to get the wording that is now accepted by the Minister, and I presume that will be uncontroversial in the Assembly, and that will lead to an independent review which will inform the way forward on that, to make sure that rather than tinkering with good intentions, what ends up coming about as a result of it is comprehensive and has all things covered off, and make sure that it doesn't inadvertently apply unintended consequences. So that's a really positive step forward that I'm very pleased to be supporting. So with Part B, of course, I'm also supporting that and urge other states members to do so too. When I first saw it, I think instinctively thought, well, there's an issue of basic fairness here, which is that if you're being invited to the island to work here, that your costs ought to be covered for you coming here. To me, that just strikes me as basic fairness. But hearing the testimonies that Deputy Poirier has highlighted to us, including that she referred to in her opening speech, Paul, I think it was, she named him as, it highlights the kind of experiences that many of us can't relate to because we've never been through and don't know what it's like to feel under that kind of pressure, where you turn up somewhere where you have no network, no people around you who you believe and trust are on your side, no understanding of what the public services are, and having to rely on people who you hope, and in most instances, will be decent and will be looking out for you, but when it turns out they're not, and you have no idea where to turn, things can escalate to the point of them causing real crises for people that can have devastating consequences. And the story that Deputy Poirier gave in her opening speech should highlight that to all of us. And so when I look at Part B now in the context of what she had explained, it's not just about the basic issue of fairness, but it is also about the safeguarding to make sure that people who, when they're coming to Jersey to work, don't end up inadvertently in a situation where they have no agency and end up in servitude because of that, because they are deprived of the ability to exert the choices that anyone else would be able to get themselves into a better position. I do personally think that the way that Part B is worded does give the flexibility that's needed to make sure that what happens as a result of it is done properly, because there are things that will need to be considered in it. There'll be things that we'll need to think about, are there exceptions, are there allowances, are there particular circumstances where it might apply slightly differently, and all of that is worthy of consideration, and all of that is worthy of examination, which is the word that is in that part of the proposition, which then goes on to say to produce a roadmap for implementation. And I believe that the way it's worded does provide the flexibility that is necessary to make sure we end up in the right position there. So I think just one point I did want to clarify, following on from some comments of Deputy Tadjer about the impact that that these issues can have on people, particularly when they're facing domestic violence, is just an acknowledgement of changes that have come into force in the last few years on income support, so that some support can be provided for, I believe it's 3 months in those instances, and it's important that people know that and know that there is some availability there. But that one day will hopefully be part of a wider set of measures that will result, because of this proposition, providing much greater safeguarding and rights to those who come to Jersey, for whom we should all be grateful for the work they do here, and make sure that they are never forgotten and their needs are never considered an afterthought to us, because everyone on this island deserves to be treated with equality and dignity. And so I'm very pleased to be supporting both parts A and part B of this proposition.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the proposition? If no one else wishes to speak, I call upon Deputy Porre to reply. Deputy Porre, do you want to reply?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I would like to thank all the members in this assembly for being open and prepared to listen to this debate, and more in particularly, I would like to thank the members who have contributed. And I will try very quickly just to thank everyone individually. So I would like to thank the Home Affairs Minister for her contribution, and the fact that she agrees that a lot of work needs still to be done. And I'm very grateful to her, to be honest with that. The other aspect that the Home Affairs Minister referred to about the employers' pay principle, again, I understood that there would be a setback on Part B, but what I would like to say is that employers' pay principle should not be dependent on a review, sir. It really is not what the Part B is there for. A review is something that will be conducted, and after the conclusions of the review, then we can bring into force amendments or changes to the policy. The workers' pay principle, it should not be dependent on that review. It should be something that the island wishes to adopt because it's the right thing to do, and because we care about our economy and about the people who come here to work. It's not a review. Again, I just say, if it was a review, that the minister could come back, or whoever minister may be next year, and say, actually, the review says such, so we are not going to implement it. So I do disagree with the minister on that, but I do appreciate contributions. Okay, so I'm going to thank Deputy Ina Garner for her contributions and for illustrating the cases she has been involved with, and I very much thank her. And when she was talking, all I could think was, actually, when I first started, all I did was walking around with migrant workers. And I am very grateful that at some point ICC was put in place, and I could have migrant workers being supported or signposted by ICC, while I, as a deputy, would have the time and the mindset to actually work with the policies. As before, I was far too overwhelmed with the amount of people coming to me with complaints to actually do anything about it. So I would like to thank you for your contribution. I would like also to thank our Deputy Raluca Kovac for sharing a sister and her own story, which I'm sure it was difficult, and for being so clear on the support she's given me and the proposition. I couldn't endorse her words more if I tried. Deputy Lindsay Felton, I thank her for stating that the policy urgently needs updating. I thank her for her open and honest contribution, and for highlighting also that Part B of the proposition, and for sharing that businesses such as Tesco are already acting within the manner I'm now proposing, and that countries such as the Philippines, where we have migrant workers coming to work in the agriculture industry, they are actually expecting and demanding that the employer's pay principle is applied to their workers, as it's so detrimental to their financial well-being. So I do thank Deputy Felton for highlighting those issues. on a speech as I would have forgotten to do so, so thank you. Deputy Tadier, thank you for sharing what is happening in the wider Jersey. Again, something I didn't speak on my speech, and for commenting on social media feedback that I have been exposed to every time I work with migrant workers. So, and for me, that shows that as an island, we really need to be better educated and to educate all ourselves on the benefits migrant workers bring to this island. It is time to change the backward mentality. And if we are really to be honest, nearly 50% of Jersey population is made of immigrants. So we really need to be sensitive and appreciative of what migrant workers bring to this island. So thank you for sharing that. I would like to thank Deputy Barbara Ward as well for highlighting another fundamental issue that affects migrant workers. And I do really hope that the ministers of now have been listening because this issue will come back again in the next assembly. It does need to be tackled. And the Deputy Ward is right, and that her contributions need to be addressed. So thank you. I would also thank the last speaker, Sam Mezek. Thank you for making very clear that as a Jersey man, he does not want his well-being to be to the detriment of others who have less than us. And for highlighting how difficult and scary it is for workers to come here without a network support. And if we, as an island, we are not providing the right protection for them, we are actually accomplice of treating people without regard. So I thank all of those that have contributed. Shall I call for the appel, sir?
Yes. Do you want to do A and B separately, like you suggested?
Well, ideally, I would like it to be all together, but I think for clarity and to support what the minister said, yes, let's do it separately. Thank you.
All right. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. And I invite the greffier to open the voting on Part A of the proposition. If all members with the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. Online. Part A has been adopted, 44 votes for and 1 abstention.
The Connaught Harbour St Clement abstained.
Now move on to Part B. I invite the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. Well, Part B has been lost because there were 22 votes for and the same amount contra, with 1 abstention. Should we redo it as it's near the end? Do you want the names or? Yeah. Do you want the names?
Sorry, sir, could you maybe perhaps explain a bit more about the lost side of it?
If it's a tie, then understanding orders, it means it's not been adopted. So A was adopted and B was not adopted because the vote was a tie.
Could I come back again with the B at another time, sir?
Not today, you can't.
Next time you move it on block.
Yes, it's quite. Did you want the names? Does somebody want the names or not? Yes.
Those members voting for the Connaught Harbour, St Lawrence, St Martin, St John and St Mary, and Deputies Southern, Tadier, Doublé, Rob Ward, Alves, Gardner, Mesick, Balash, Coles, Ore, Miles, Renouf, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Jearn, Kovac, Wilson and Stevenson. Those members voting contre, the Connaught Harbour, St Helier, St Brelard, Trinity, St Peter, Grouville, St Juan and St Saviour, and Deputies Labby, Luce, Morel, Lahegara, Ayer, Gorst, Farnham, Wall, Rosebinet, Miller, Howe, Ferry, Alex Curtis, Barbara Ward and Andrews, and the Connaught Harbour, St Clement abstained.
As it's the last meeting before the election, apart from Liberation Day, and the last meeting in this chamber before the election, I'd like to say a few words, if I may. Of course, for some of you, you'll be leaving the chamber today for the last time as elected members. Some of you will know that, and others won't know that. But some of you have let us know that you are retiring. On behalf of myself and the Deputy Bailiff and the greffier and the Deputy Greffier and all their staff, I offer my very best wishes to those of you who are not standing again. I don't know who all of you are, but some of you, I can look at you and express my gratitude, at least visually. You've served the States and your fellow islanders for many decades, and it's been a real privilege and a pleasure to work with you all. You'll all be very much missed, certainly by me, and I wish you all the best for the next stage of your lives, whether it's retirement or something else. For those standing again, it's possible we'll see you again in this chamber, and we wish you all the best on the campaign trail. And although you, of course, have your differences politically, certainly from my perspective, I think all members of this chamber are united in their commitment to this island and the welfare of its people, which includes, of course, those who've come from other countries to make their home in our island. The final thing is to share some last statistics over the last 4 years. There'll be no great surprises, I'm afraid to say, in these statistics. Starting with propositions, of course, which aren't that interesting. There are 411 lodged, 367 debated, most of the last 5 weeks, so it seems. 346 amendments lodged, of which 290 were debated. Most oral questions from Deputy Renouf, with 375, and most speeches, the deputy who broke the 300 barrier on Friday and is now on 305 is, of course, Deputy Tadier. 305, it sometimes feels like more, but it's 305. Most propositions from a backbencher, Deputy Andrews, with 27. I've not kept a record of how many were adopted. 9. Oh, that's very good. 9 out of 27. Unparliamentary language used only now 9 times. I still regret...
Can you read them out, sir?
Sorry? No, I still regret letting Deputy Ward get away with his Sex Panther. But there it is. So that's all I propose to say. Chair of PPC, any observations before we adjourn?
Just for future business, thank you, sir. I can advise that the next meeting of the State Assembly will be on Saturday the 9th of May for Liberation Day, and that the first meeting after the election will be on Friday the 19th of June for the election of the next Chief Minister. So those members who are not of a superstitious bent can put that date in their diaries now. With that, sir, I propose future business. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair of PPC. Are members content now to adjourn?
Sir, if I may.
Yes, of course.
I don't want to take up members' time, but I am one of those who have declared that I will not be standing again.
Yes.
So this is my last opportunity to address my colleagues across the chamber, and I have been told by my daughter that I must do so, sir. So I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you, sir, and all members of the states with whom I have served since 2005.
I've been here a long time. I can't remember if it's customary for those members who have declared that they're not standing to say a few words. But I'd just like to say, sir, that over that time, I've seen some characters in here. I've observed some controversies, and I've witnessed members experience difficult times, sir. But I'm pleased to say, though, that all of the members that I have served with have had at heart the best intentions of the island and islanders. So as I take my leave of the Assembly, sir, I would like to wish all of the candidates in the forthcoming election the very best, and those who are returned to this Assembly, I believe they will continue with the tradition of serving the island and islanders and putting them at their hearts. So I'd like to say thanks and adios.
Thank you very much indeed. The members content now to adjourn? Assembly is adjourned until Liberation Day.